I never thought I would be the kind of grandmother who got left behind. You know the ones I'm talking about. The ones whose children move away and forget to call. The ones who sit alone on holidays while their families celebrate somewhere else. The ones who become invisible, as if all those years of love and sacrifice never happened. I used to feel sorry for those women. I used to think, that won't be me. My family loves me. We're close. But life has a way of teaching you lessons you never asked to learn. And now, at 71 years old, I understand something I wish I didn't. Sometimes the people you love most are the ones who hurt you deepest. And sometimes, no matter how much you give, it's never quite enough. The day I realized my family didn't want me anymore wasn't dramatic. There was no big fight, no shouting, no doors slamming. It was quiet, painfully quiet. We were sitting in my daughter's living room. It was a Sunday afternoon in late October, the kind of day where the sun comes through the windows at an angle, making everything look softer than it really is. My daughter, Rebecca, was on the couch with her husband, Michael. Their 2 children, my grandchildren, were upstairs playing video games. And I was sitting in the armchair by the window, the one I always sat in when I visited, the one that had become, over the years, my designated spot. Rebecca was talking about Thanksgiving, about their plans, about who was coming and what they were cooking. And I sat there listening, assuming I was part of those plans. Why wouldn't I be? I'd spent every Thanksgiving with them for the past 15 years, ever since my husband died. Before that, they came to my house. We had a tradition, a rhythm. I thought it was unbreakable, but then Michael said something small, something that might have seemed insignificant to anyone else. He said, "So it'll just be us and my parents this year, nice and small." And Rebecca nodded. She agreed. She said it would be nice to have a quiet holiday, just immediate family. I sat there, holding my coffee cup, feeling my chest tighten. Just immediate family. As if I wasn't immediate family. As if being a mother, being a grandmother, somehow made me optional. I waited for one of them to correct it. To say, "Oh, and Mom, of course." But they didn't. The conversation just moved on. They started talking about what kind of turkey to buy, whether to make stuffing from scratch, whether the kids would eat sweet potatoes this year, and I sat there in my designated chair, in the house I had visited every Sunday for years. And I realized something that made my throat close up and my eyes burn. I wasn't invited. I was being quietly, politely excluded. And they were doing it right in front of me. As if I weren't even there. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My voice would have cracked. I would have cried. And I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to be the needy mother, the burdened grandmother, the emotional woman who couldn't handle change. So I just sat there, smiled when appropriate, nodded, sipped my coffee even though it suddenly tasted like nothing. When I got home that afternoon, I stood in my kitchen and stared at the calendar hanging on the wall. November was blank. December was blank. No family dinners marked down. No grandchildren's events circled. Just empty white squares stretching into the future. And I thought about how long it had been since my daughter had called me just to talk. How long it had been since my grandchildren had asked to come over. How long it had been since I'd felt wanted instead of tolerated. The truth settled over me like a heavy blanket. I was being phased out, slowly, carefully, so gradually that I hadn't even noticed until it was almost complete. The weekly Sunday dinners had become bi-weekly, then monthly, then whenever I initiated them. The phone calls had gotten shorter, the invitations fewer, the enthusiasm dimmer. And now, Thanksgiving, the holiday that was supposed to be about family and gratitude. And I wasn't even invited. I sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd fed my daughter thousands of meals when she was growing up. The same table where we'd done homework and had heart-to-heart talks and planned her wedding. And I wondered where it all went wrong. What had I done? What had I failed to do? When did I become someone they had to tolerate instead of someone they wanted around? The questions swirled in my head for days. I replayed every conversation, every visit, every interaction, looking for the moment, the thing I said or did that made them start pulling away. But I couldn't find it. Or maybe there wasn't one moment. Maybe it was 1,000 small moments. 1,000 little ways I was too much or not enough. Too old-fashioned. Too talkative. too full of opinions about things that no longer concerned me. I thought about calling Rebecca, about asking her directly, why wasn't I invited to Thanksgiving? But I was afraid of the answer, afraid she'd say something that would confirm what I already suspected, that I was a burden, that they needed space, that they wanted to build their own traditions without me hovering in the background, reminding them of the past. So I didn't call. I waited, hoping she would realize the mistake, hoping she would call me, apologize, say she'd just forgotten to mention it. But she didn't call. Days passed, a week, 2 weeks, and Thanksgiving got closer and closer, and still, nothing. I started planning what I would do that day. I couldn't just sit at home alone, staring at the walls, thinking about the family gathering that was happening without me. I looked into volunteering at a soup kitchen. I thought about going to a restaurant, though the idea of sitting alone in a crowded dining room on Thanksgiving felt worse than staying home. I considered calling my sister, who lived 3 states away, but she had her own family plans and I didn't want to impose. I didn't want to be the sad, lonely grandmother who needed to be rescued. The rejection hurt in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't sharp and sudden like a slap. It was dull and constant like a toothache. Always there, always throbbing, making everything else harder to focus on. I'd wake up in the morning and for a few seconds, I'd forget. And then I'd remember, and the weight would settle back on my chest. I'd spent my entire adult life being needed. When my children were young, I was everything to them. I was the one they ran to when they were hurt, the one they asked for when they were scared, the one who made everything better with a hug and a kind word. And then they grew up, as children do, and they needed me less. But I was still their mother, still important, still part of their lives in meaningful ways. Or so I thought. My husband used to tell me that I needed to let go more, that I held on too tight, that children need space to become adults. And I tried. I really did. I didn't call too often. I didn't show up uninvited. I waited for them to reach out. I respected their boundaries. But somewhere along the way, respecting their boundaries turned into being forgotten. Giving them space turned into being pushed out. And now here I was, 71 years old, healthy, independent, still sharp-minded and capable, but unwanted by the people I loved most in the world. It wasn't fair. But then again, life rarely is. I thought about my own mother. She died when I was 45, so she never got old enough to experience this kind of rejection. But I remembered my grandmother, my father's mother, how she used to complain that no one visited her anymore. How she'd sit in her apartment and wait for the phone to ring. How she'd light up like a child on Christmas when any of us came to see her, even if it was just for a few minutes. I used to think she was exaggerating, that she was being dramatic, that of course we all loved her and wanted to see her. We were just busy. We had lives. But now I understood. Now I knew what it felt like to wait for a phone call that never comes, to hope for an invitation that never arrives. To be the one who always has to reach out first, and even then, you're met with polite excuses and vague promises of soon that never materialize. My grandmother died alone in her apartment. She'd had a stroke and no one found her for 2 days because no one had checked on her. We all felt guilty afterward. We all said we should have visited more, called more, been more present. But guilt after someone dies doesn't change anything. It just sits there, heavy and useless, reminding you of all the things you should have done but didn't. I wondered if that's how my story would end. Alone in this house, waiting for people who stopped coming, becoming the cautionary tale my grandchildren might tell their children someday. We should visit Grandma more. Remember what happened to great-grandma. The thought made me feel sick, made me angry, made me want to call Rebecca right then and demand answers. Demand respect. Demand to be treated like a human being who mattered. But anger fades quickly when you're old. It takes too much energy. And you learn that demanding things from people who don't want to give them only makes you look desperate and pathetic. So I swallowed my anger, pushed it down deep where all the other disappointments lived. And I tried to accept what was becoming increasingly clear. This was my life now. This was what aging meant. Not just gray hair and aching joints and fading eyesight, but also fading relationships, fading importance, fading presence in the lives of the people you raised and loved and sacrificed for. I sat in my living room that night, the house quiet around me, and I cried. Not loud, dramatic tears, but quiet ones. The kind that slide down your face while you stare at nothing in particular. The kind that come from a deep well of sadness you didn't even know you had. And I mourned, not for what had died, but for what was dying. The relationship with my daughter, the connection with my grandchildren, the family I thought I had but apparently never did. And somewhere in the midst of that grief, I made a decision. I would go to Thanksgiving at Rebecca's house. I would show up uninvited if I had to. I would make it impossible for them to exclude me without openly rejecting me. And then I would know for sure. I would see it in their faces. The discomfort, the irritation, the wish that I hadn't come. Maybe that was masochistic. Maybe I was setting myself up for more pain. But I needed to know. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes instead of just suspecting it in my heart. So I waited. I counted down the days, and I prepared myself for the moment when I would finally understand exactly where I stood in my own family. I wasn't always this person, the woman sitting alone, wondering why her family doesn't want her anymore. There was a time when I was the center of everything, when my house was full of noise and laughter and life, when I was young and needed and certain of my place in the world. But that feels like someone else's life now. Like a story I heard once but didn't actually live. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone and families stay put for generations. My parents were good people, hardworking, devoted to their children. My father worked at the steel mill, and my mother took care of the house and us kids. There were 4 of us. I was the oldest. Then came my 2 brothers and my baby sister. And like most oldest daughters in those days, I became a second mother. Helping with diapers and homework and meals. Learning early what it meant to put other people's needs before your own. I was good at it. Taking care of people. It came naturally to me. I liked being needed. Liked being the one people turned to when something went wrong. And I suppose that shaped everything that came after. My whole identity became tied up in being useful. Being necessary. Being the person who held things together. I met my husband, David, when I was 19. He was 22, just back from serving in the military, working construction and trying to figure out what to do with his life. We met at a church picnic. He was quiet, a little awkward, but kind. And when he looked at me, I felt seen in a way I hadn't felt before. Not just as the responsible oldest daughter, but as a person, a woman, someone worth paying attention to. We dated for a year before he proposed. Got married in a simple ceremony at the church where we met. I wore my mother's wedding dress, altered to fit me. David wore a suit he borrowed from his brother. We didn't have much money, but we had each other. And back then, that felt like enough. We moved into a small apartment. David got a job at a factory. I worked part-time at a grocery store. We were building a life, saving money, planning for the future. And 2 years into our marriage, I got pregnant with Rebecca. Being pregnant was terrifying and wonderful at the same time. I was 22 years old and about to become someone's mother, someone's entire world. The responsibility of it felt enormous. But I was ready, or at least, I thought I was. Rebecca was born on a snowy January morning. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, perfect in every way. When they placed her in my arms, I felt something shift inside me. A fierce, protective love that was almost painful in its intensity. This was my daughter, my child, and I would do anything for her, sacrifice anything, give her everything. And I did. For the next 18 years, my life revolved around her. I quit my job to stay home full-time. David worked long hours, sometimes 2 jobs, to make sure we had enough. We scraped by, but we managed. Rebecca had everything she needed. Clothes, food, a safe home. But more than that, she had parents who loved her, who were present, who showed up to every school event and helped with every project and listened to every story. I baked cupcakes for her class on her birthday every year. I sewed her Halloween costumes by hand. I sat at the kitchen table helping with homework until late at night. I drove her to dance classes and piano lessons and friends' houses. I was there for every skinned knee and broken heart and moment of triumph. I was the mother I had always wanted to be, devoted, attentive, all in. David was a good father, quiet but steady, He worked hard to provide for us, but the day-to-day parenting fell mostly to me. And I didn't mind. I liked it. Like being the one Rebecca ran to. The one she needed. The one who made everything okay. But children grew up. They become teenagers. They pull away. And Rebecca was no different. Around 13 or 14, she started spending more time in her room. More time with friends. Less time wanting to talk to me. I told myself it was normal, natural, part of becoming independent. But it hurt more than I expected. This child who had been my constant companion, my purpose, my everything, suddenly didn't need me the same way. I tried not to take it personally, tried to give her space, but I mourned the loss of closeness, the loss of being the person she told everything to. And maybe, looking back, I held on too tight. Maybe I made her feel guilty for growing up. Maybe I let her see too much of my sadness, and it made her want to pull away even more. She went away to college when she was 18. A state school about 3 hours away. Far enough that she couldn't come home every weekend, but close enough that she could if she wanted to. She didn't want to. She came home for Thanksgiving and Christmas that first year, and then summer. But each visit felt a little more strained. A little more like she was fulfilling an obligation instead of wanting to be there. I told myself it was fine, that she was building her own life, that this was what I wanted for her. Independence, freedom, but it didn't feel fine. It felt like losing her. David was better at accepting it than I was. He'd say, "She's growing up. She's supposed to leave. That's what we raised her to do." And he was right. But knowing something intellectually doesn't make it hurt less emotionally. Rebecca met Michael in college. Her junior year, she brought him home for Christmas, and I could see it in her eyes. This was serious. This was the person she saw a future with. He was nice enough, polite, clean-cut, from a good family. But I didn't know him. Didn't know if he was good enough for my daughter. And honestly, no one would have been. No one could have measured up to the standards I had in my head. They got engaged right after graduation. I helped plan the wedding, though Rebecca made it clear she wanted to do most of it herself. She had very specific ideas, very modern ideas that didn't match the traditional wedding I'd always imagined for her. But I stepped back, let her have what she wanted. Even when it hurt to be relegated to the sidelines of this major life event, the wedding was beautiful. Rebecca looked stunning. Michael looked happy. And I cried. Happy tears. Everyone assumed. But they were complicated tears. Happy for her, yes. But also sad for me. Sad that this chapter was closing. That she was no longer mine in the way she used to be. She belonged to someone else now. And I had to accept that. They moved to a city 2 hours away. Michael had a job there. Rebecca found work at a marketing firm. They bought a small house. Started building their life together. And I tried to be supportive. Tried not to call too often or visit too much. Tried to give them space to be a couple. But I missed her. God, I missed her. Missed having her around. Missed knowing what was happening in her life day to day. Missed being important to her. David retired when he was 65. We'd saved enough to live comfortably. Not extravagantly, but comfortably. We had plans. Things we wanted to do. Places we wanted to see. But 2 years into his retirement, he started feeling tired all the time. Started losing weight. Started looking gray and worn. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday in March. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctor said 6 months, maybe a year with treatment. David refused the treatment. Said he didn't want to spend his last months feeling sick and weak. He wanted to live whatever time he had left on his own terms. Those 6 months were the hardest of my life. Watching the man I'd spent 40 years with slowly fade away. Watching him get weaker and thinner and more tired. Watching him slip away from me day by day. Rebecca came to visit when she could. But she had her own life. Her own responsibilities. And I didn't want to burden her with my grief. David died on a Sunday morning in September. Peacefully. In our bed. Holding my hand. And I became a widow at 64 years old. The grief was overwhelming. Not just for losing him, but for losing the life we'd built together. The partnership. The companionship. The person who knew me better than anyone else in the world. I felt unmoored. Like a boat that had lost its anchor and was just drifting wherever the current took it. Rebecca wanted me to move closer to her. Said I shouldn't be alone. said I should sell the house and find an apartment near them. But I couldn't, not yet. This house held too many memories. David was everywhere in it, and letting go of it felt like letting go of him completely. So I stayed, and I tried to build a new life. A life as a widow, a life alone. I joined groups at the senior center, played cards, took watercolor classes, volunteered at the library, but none of it filled the emptiness. None of it made me feel less alone. Rebecca had her first child 2 years after David died. A boy, my first grandchild, Jackson. I drove to the hospital as soon as I got the call, held that tiny baby and felt my heart crack open with love. This was a second chance, a new generation, a new way to be needed and important. I visited as often as I could, helped with the baby, changed diapers, did laundry, cooked meals, tried to be useful, tried to be the kind of grandmother who was a blessing, not a burden. And for a while, it felt good. It felt like I had a purpose again, a role. Their second child, a daughter named Lily, came 3 years later, and I did the same thing. Showed up, helped, made myself useful. But somewhere along the way, something changed. I started to feel like I was intruding, like my help wasn't wanted anymore, like I was doing too much or not enough or just not doing it right. Rebecca started making comments. Little things. Mom, I've got it. Mom, you don't have to do that. Mom, we're fine. And each comment felt like a small rejection, a gentle push toward the exit. I tried to pull back, tried to visit less, call less, but then I felt forgotten. Felt like if I didn't reach out, no one would. And maybe that was true. Maybe I was the only one holding this relationship together. Maybe if I stopped trying, it would just dissolve completely. And now here I was, 71 years old, widowed, with a daughter who seemed to tolerate me more than love me, with grandchildren who barely knew me, with a life that felt small and pointless and lonely. I thought about what David would say if he were here. He'd probably tell me I was overthinking it, that Rebecca loved me, that family is complicated, that I needed to stop taking everything so personally. But David wasn't here, and I was left to figure it all out on my own. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving felt like walking through fog. Everything was blurry and uncertain, and I couldn't see clearly what was ahead. I went through my days mechanically, watering plants, doing laundry, watching television shows I didn't really care about, but my mind was always elsewhere, always on that Sunday afternoon, always on Rebecca's words, just immediate family. I kept waiting for her to call, to apologize, to say it had been a misunderstanding, but she didn't call, and the longer the silence stretched, the more certain I became that it hadn't been a mistake. She meant it. I wasn't invited, and apparently she saw nothing wrong with that. Part of me wanted to confront her, to pick up the phone and ask directly what was going on. But another part of me, the bigger part, was terrified of what she might say. What if she confirmed my worst fears? What if she told me I was too much, too needy, too old-fashioned? That they wanted space from me? That they wanted to build their own traditions without me hovering in the background? So I stayed silent, and the silence grew heavier with each passing day. I started noticing other things too. Things I'd probably been ignoring for months, maybe years. How Jackson and Lily never asked to come visit me anymore. How they used to beg to spend weekends at Grandma's house, and now they seemed relieved when visits were cut short. How they spent more time on their tablets than talking to me. How they looked uncomfortable when I tried to hug them, as if physical affection from me was somehow embarrassing. I remembered when Jackson was 4 years old, how he used to run to me the moment I arrived. How he'd wrap his arms around my legs and beg me to play with him. How he'd show me his toys and his drawings and talk nonstop about everything happening in his little world. Now he was 11, and he barely looked up from his phone when I walked in. Lily was 8. Still young enough that I thought we had a chance at closeness. But even she seemed distant. Polite but distant. She'd answer my questions with 1 or 2 words. She'd accept the gifts I brought but without much enthusiasm. And when I tried to engage her in conversation, she'd glance at her mother as if asking for permission to leave. I tried not to take it personally. Children change as they grow. They become more interested in their peers than their grandparents. That's natural, normal, but it still hurt. It still felt like rejection, even if it wasn't intentional. I thought about my own grandmothers, how much I had loved them when I was young, how I used to visit them eagerly, happy to hear their stories and eat their cookies and feel special in their presence. Had I pulled away from them as I got older too? Had I hurt them the way my grandchildren were hurting me now? I couldn't remember, but the thought that I might have made me feel even worse. One afternoon in early November, I decided to bake cookies. Chocolate chip, Jackson's favorite. Or at least, they used to be his favorite. Maybe his tastes had changed. Maybe he didn't like chocolate chip anymore. But it was all I knew to do. Baking had always been my love language, my way of showing care. So I made 3 dozen cookies, packaged them carefully in a tin, and drove to Rebecca's house. It was a weekday afternoon. I knew the kids would be home from school soon. I thought maybe I could be there when they arrived. Maybe help with homework or just chat. Maybe remind them that I existed, that I cared, that I was still here. Rebecca seemed surprised when she answered the door. Not pleasantly surprised, just surprised. She was wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked tired. "Mom," she said, "what are you doing here?" Not "Hi, Mom," or "What a nice surprise." Just "What are you doing here?" in a tone that suggested this was an inconvenience. I held up the tin of cookies. "I made these for the kids. Jackson's favorite." She looked at the tin, then at me, and I saw it. That flicker of irritation, that tiny tightening around her eyes. She didn't want me there. "That's sweet, Mom, but you didn't have to drive all the way out here. You could have just told me. I would have picked them up next time I was in town." Next time she was in town. As if she visited regularly. As if that was something that happened. But we both knew it didn't. She hadn't been to my house in months. "I wanted to see the kids," I said. "I thought maybe I could stay for a bit. Help with homework or something." Rebecca hesitated. I could see her trying to find a polite way to say no. "They have a lot of homework today. And Lily has dance class in an hour. It's kind of a hectic afternoon. I could drive her to dance class," I offered. "Give you a break." "No. That's okay. Michael's going to take her. He's working from home today." Michael was home. Of course he was. And still, she didn't want me to stay. I stood there on her doorstep, holding my tin of cookies, feeling foolish, feeling unwanted. I should have left, should have just handed her the cookies and driven home. But I couldn't. I couldn't let her shut me out without at least trying to understand why. "Rebecca," I said quietly, "is everything okay? Between us, I mean?" She looked uncomfortable. "Everything's fine, Mom." "Why?" "I just feel like, I don't know, like you don't want me around as much anymore." She sighed. Not a sad sigh, an exasperated one. "Mom, that's not true. We're just busy. You know how it is with the kids and work and everything. I know you're busy. I'm not asking for much. Just, I don't know, to be included sometimes." "You are included. Am I invited to Thanksgiving?" The question hung in the air between us. Rebecca's face changed. She looked caught, guilty but also defensive. "We're keeping it small this year," she said finally. "Just us and Michael's parents. But not me." "Mom, don't make this into a big thing. You're excluding me from Thanksgiving, Rebecca." "How is that not a big thing?" "We're not excluding you. We want a quieter holiday this year. Something low-key." "And I make it not low-key?" "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." We stared at each other. Mother and daughter, the relationship that was supposed to be the most important in my life. And it felt broken, irreparably broken. Rebecca's expression softened slightly. "Look, Mom, it's not personal. We just need some space to do things our own way. Without me." I finished for her. She didn't deny it. She just stood there, looking uncomfortable and guilty and also resolute. She meant what she was saying. She wanted space from me, and nothing I said was going to change that. I handed her the cookies. "Give these to the kids." "Mom, it's fine, Rebecca. I understand." I turned and walked back to my car. My legs felt shaky, my throat tight, but I didn't cry. Not there, not where she could see. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove home. And only when I was safely inside my own house, with the door closed and the curtains drawn, did I let myself fall apart. I cried for a long time that day, sitting on my couch, clutching a throw pillow, sobbing like a child. I cried for the relationship I thought I had with my daughter, the closeness that had apparently been one-sided, the love that didn't seem to be returned in the way I gave it. I cried for the grandchildren who barely knew me, for the holidays I wouldn't be invited to, for the life I thought I'd have in my old age but clearly wouldn't. When the tears finally stopped, I felt empty, hollowed out, like something essential had been removed from inside me and I was just a shell now, just going through the motions of living without really being alive. The days after that visit were dark. I didn't leave the house unless I had to, didn't answer the phone, didn't check my email. I just existed in a fog of sadness and confusion and something that felt dangerously close to despair. My sister called. She lived in California now, had moved there with her husband after their kids grew up. We talked maybe once a month, usually just catching up on surface-level things, family updates, health news, weather. But this time, I couldn't do it. Couldn't pretend everything was fine. "You sound off," she said after a few minutes of stilted conversation. "What's going on?" And I told her everything about Thanksgiving, about Rebecca, about feeling unwanted and invisible and forgotten. And as I talked, the tears came again. I cried on the phone to my sister, something I hadn't done since we were children. She listened, didn't interrupt, just let me get it all out. And when I was done, she was quiet for a moment before speaking. "I'm sorry you're going through this," she said. "It sounds really hard." "I don't understand what I did wrong," I said. "I've tried to be a good mother, a good grandmother, but nothing I do is right." "Maybe it's not about you," she suggested gently. "Maybe Rebecca is dealing with her own stuff, her own stress. And sometimes when we're overwhelmed, we push people away, even people we love. But why me? Why does she push me away but not Michael's parents?" My sister didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe she did but didn't want to say it. Maybe the answer was simply that Rebecca preferred Michael's parents, that they were easier, more fun, less complicated, that they knew how to be grandparents without being needy or emotional or wanting too much. "What are you going to do about Thanksgiving?" my sister asked. "I don't know. Part of me wants to show up anyway, force them to either include me or tell me to my face that I'm not welcome. But another part of me thinks that would just make things worse, that I'd look desperate and pathetic." "You could come here," she offered. "Spend Thanksgiving with us. We'd love to have you." It was a kind offer, but the thought of flying across the country to spend the holiday with my sister's family, who I barely knew anymore, felt almost as depressing as spending it alone. "Thanks," I said, "but I think I'll probably just volunteer somewhere. Serve meals at a shelter or something. At least then I'd feel useful." "That's a nice idea. But you shouldn't have to spend Thanksgiving volunteering because your own family doesn't want you." "I know. But what's the alternative? Sitting at home feeling sorry for myself?" "You could confront Rebecca. Really confront her. Tell her how hurt you are." I tried. She just made excuses. Said they need space. Then give them space. Stop reaching out. See if they even notice. It was what I'd been thinking too. But hearing someone else say it made it feel more real, more possible. Maybe I needed to stop trying so hard. Stop being the one who always reached out first. Stop making myself available and see if anyone actually missed me. "Maybe you're right," I said. "I'm sorry, sis. I really am. You deserve better than this." We talked a bit longer, but I was exhausted, emotionally drained. When we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my living room and thought about what my sister had said, about giving them space, about stepping back and seeing what happened. It felt scary, like letting go of a rope I'd been clinging to for years. What if I let go and just fell? What if no one caught me? What if I stopped reaching out and discovered that no one reached back? But maybe that was a truth I needed to face. Maybe I needed to know, definitively, where I stood. Even if it hurt, even if it destroyed me, at least then I'd know. So I made a decision. Starting that day, I wouldn't call Rebecca unless she called me first. I wouldn't text, wouldn't visit, wouldn't reach out in any way. I would wait and see how long it took for her to notice my absence, to wonder where I was, to care enough to check in. It was an experiment, and I was terrified of the results. But I needed to know. I needed to understand if this relationship was being held together solely by my effort, or if there was something real there. Something reciprocal. Something worth fighting for. The first week of silence was excruciating. Every day I'd check my phone, look for a text, a missed call, anything, but there was nothing. Rebecca didn't reach out, didn't seem to notice that I'd stopped calling, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. I kept myself busy during that week, cleaned out closets, organized drawers, did all those tasks I'd been putting off for months. Physical activity helped. It gave me something to focus on besides the growing ache in my chest. But at night, when the house was quiet and I was alone with my thoughts, the pain came rushing back. The realization that my daughter didn't need me, didn't want me, didn't even seem to notice I was gone. I thought about Thanksgiving constantly. What would I do? Where would I go? I looked into volunteer opportunities, but most of them were already full. Apparently, lots of people preferred serving others to facing their own lonely holidays. I considered cooking a small meal just for myself, but the thought of it was too depressing. Eating turkey alone at a table set for one. By the second week, something shifted inside me. The sadness began to harden into something else. Not quite anger, but close. Resentment, maybe, or disappointment so deep it felt like betrayal. I'd given my entire life to raising Rebecca. I'd sacrificed my own dreams and goals and ambitions to make sure she had everything she needed. I'd been there for every moment of her childhood, every triumph, every failure, every need. And this was how she repaid me, by pushing me out of her life like I was some kind of burden she needed to shed. It wasn't fair. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not the hot, explosive kind of anger, but the cold, bitter kind. The kind that settles in your bones and changes the way you see the world. I started looking at other families differently. When I was at the grocery store or the library or out walking, I'd see grandparents with their grandchildren, laughing together, holding hands, clearly enjoying each other's company. And I'd feel this sharp stab of jealousy. Why did they get that? Why were they valued when I wasn't? What made them different from me? Maybe I'd been too involved when Rebecca was young. Maybe I'd hovered too much, controlled too much, made it hard for her to breathe. Maybe I'd set expectations that were too high or standards that were impossible to meet. Maybe I'd been critical without realizing it. Maybe I'd damaged our relationship years ago and was only now seeing the consequences. But I'd only ever tried to be a good mother. I'd only ever wanted what was best for her. How had that turned into something negative? How had love become suffocation? I thought about calling a therapist. Maybe talking to a professional would help me understand what I'd done wrong, help me figure out how to fix it. But the thought of sitting in an office, explaining to a stranger that my own daughter didn't want me around, felt humiliating. So I didn't call. I just continued sitting with my pain, trying to make sense of it on my own. Thanksgiving was now just a week away, and I still didn't have a plan. I couldn't bring myself to volunteer, couldn't bring myself to cook, couldn't bring myself to do anything except exist in a state of suspended animation, waiting for something to change even though I knew nothing would. And then, 3 days before Thanksgiving, my phone rang. It was Rebecca. My heart jumped. This was it. She was calling to apologize, to invite me, to tell me she'd made a mistake. I answered on the second ring. "Hi, Mom." Her voice sounded normal, casual, as if nothing was wrong, as if we'd just talked yesterday. "Hi, Rebecca. I haven't heard from you in a while. Everything okay?" "Everything okay." As if the reason she hadn't heard from me wasn't obvious. As if she couldn't figure out why I might not be calling. "I'm fine," I said. My voice sounded flat even to my own ears. "Good. Listen, I was wondering if you could do me a favor. Michael's parents are coming for Thanksgiving, and his mom asked if she could borrow your roasting pan. The big one. Hers is too small for the turkey she wants to make. Would that be okay?" I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. She was calling to ask for my roasting pan, so Michael's mother could cook Thanksgiving dinner at my daughter's house, where I wasn't invited. "Mom, you there?" "I'm here. So is that okay? Can I pick it up tomorrow?" "You want to borrow my roasting pan?" "Yeah, if that's okay. For Michael's mother, right. To cook Thanksgiving dinner." There was a pause. I could hear Rebecca processing, realizing how this sounded. "Mom, I'll leave it on the porch," I said. You can pick it up whenever. Mom, don't be like this. Like what? I'm doing you a favor, aren't I? You're making this weird. I'm making it weird. Rebecca, you're asking me for my cookware so someone else can host a holiday I'm not invited to. And you don't see how that might hurt? God, Mom, this is exactly why we need space. You make everything so emotional. It's just a roasting pan. It's not about the pan. Then what is it about? It's about you excluding me from your family. It's about you treating me like I don't matter. It's about you calling only when you need something from me. That's not fair. I've been busy, you're always busy. But never too busy for Michael's parents. Never too busy for your friends. Just too busy for me, because you're exhausting, Mom. Every conversation turns into this. You're hurt about something. You're upset about something. You need reassurance about something. It's exhausting. Her words hit me like physical blows, each one landing with precision, cutting deep. And the worst part was that she meant them. This wasn't said in the heat of anger. This was how she really felt. I was exhausting. I was too much. I was a burden. I see, I said quietly. Mom, I didn't mean no. You meant it. And that's fine. I understand now. Mom, please, the roasting pan will be on the porch. Have a nice Thanksgiving, Rebecca. I hung up before she could respond. Sat there staring at the phone in my hand. And felt something inside me break completely. Not just crack. Break. Shatter into so many pieces I didn't know if they could ever be put back together. She thought I was exhausting. She thought I was too emotional. She thought I was a problem to be managed rather than a person to be loved. And maybe she was right. Maybe I was all of those things. Maybe I did make everything about me. Maybe I did require too much emotional labor. Maybe I was the problem. I put the roasting pan on the porch that evening, left it there in a plastic bag. And when Rebecca came to pick it up the next day, I didn't answer the door. I just watched from the window as she grabbed it and left. She didn't knock, didn't try to talk to me, just took what she needed and drove away. And that felt like the final confirmation. I wasn't a mother to her anymore. I was just a resource. Someone to borrow things from when convenient. Someone to keep at arm's length. Someone to be tolerated in small doses and avoided whenever possible. Thanksgiving morning arrived with gray skies and cold wind. The kind of day that matches your mood when your mood is heavy and dark. I woke up early, like I always did, and for a moment, I forgot. For just a few seconds, I was thinking about what time I needed to leave to get to Rebecca's house. What I should wear. Whether I should bring flowers or wine. And then I remembered. I wasn't going to Rebecca's house. I wasn't invited. Today I was alone. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window at the bare trees in my backyard. This was my first major holiday completely alone since David died. And even after he passed, I'd had Rebecca. I'd had the kids. I'd had family to anchor me. But now I didn't even have that. The house felt especially quiet. No television on. No music. Just silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. I thought about turning on the TV, finding a parade or a football game. Something to fill the emptiness. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. Watching happy families on TV would only make me feel worse. I considered calling my sister. She'd invited me to come to California, but it was too late for that now. And honestly, I didn't want to impose. Didn't want to be the sad, lonely sister who showed up at the last minute because she had nowhere else to go. I had some pride left, even if not much. Around 9 in the morning, my phone buzzed. A text message. My heart jumped, hoping it was Rebecca. Maybe she'd changed her mind. Maybe she was inviting me after all. But it wasn't Rebecca. It was a group message from my church. Happy Thanksgiving to all our church family. We're grateful for you. I stared at the message for a long time. Church family. The words felt hollow. I'd gone to the same church for 30 years. I knew people there. Sang in the choir for a while. Helped with potlucks and fundraisers. But I wasn't close to anyone. Not really. After David died, a few people reached out for a while. Brought meals. Sent cards. But that faded. People moved on. And I became just another face in the congregation. Someone to smile at and exchange pleasantries with, but not really know. I put the phone down and went back to staring out the window. A neighbor across the street was outside, loading something into their car. Probably heading to a family gathering. Everyone had somewhere to go. Everyone except me. The morning dragged on. I tried to read but couldn't focus. Tried to do a crossword puzzle but gave up after a few minutes. Everything felt pointless. What was the point of filling time when time felt endless and empty? Around noon, I made myself a sandwich. Not turkey. I couldn't bring myself to cook turkey for one person. Just a simple sandwich with some soup from a can. I ate it at the kitchen table, and every bite felt like effort. Like my body was going through the motions, but my mind was somewhere else. Probably at Rebecca's house. Imagining the scene there. Michael's parents laughing and joking. The kids running around excited. Rebecca in the kitchen using my roasting pan to cook a turkey I wouldn't eat. Everyone happy. Everyone together. Everyone except me. I wondered if they were talking about me. If Rebecca had told them about our phone conversation. About how exhausting I was. Were they agreeing with her? Were they relieved I wasn't there? Were they having a better time because of my absence? The thoughts spiraled. I knew they were unhealthy. Knew I was torturing myself. But I couldn't stop. My mind just kept returning to it. Picking at the wound. Making it deeper. Making it hurt more. After lunch, I tried to distract myself with television. Flipped through channels. Landed on an old movie. Something black and white that I'd seen before but couldn't remember the plot of. I watched it without really watching. Just letting the images and sounds wash over me while I sat there numb. The afternoon passed slowly. So slowly. I kept checking my phone. Hoping for a message. A call. Something. But there was nothing. Rebecca wasn't thinking about me. No one was. Around 4 o'clock. I walked around the house. Looked at the photos on the walls. Rebecca as a baby. Rebecca as a child. Rebecca on her wedding day. Jackson and Lily at various ages. A family that looked happy in still images. A family that no longer included me in any meaningful way. I stopped in front of a photo of David. It was one of my favorites. Taken maybe 10 years before he died. He was standing in our backyard smiling at the camera, looking relaxed and content. I missed him so much in that moment. Missed having someone who chose to be with me. Someone who wanted me around. Someone who made me feel like I mattered. I don't know how to do this without you. I said out loud to the photo. I don't know how to be alone like this. Of course. He didn't answer, but I could imagine what he'd say. He'd tell me I was stronger than I thought. That I'd get through this. That things would get better. David had always been optimistic. Always believed in silver linings and things working out in the end. But David had died before experiencing this kind of rejection. Before watching our daughter push me away. Maybe if he'd lived to see it, he would have felt differently. As evening approached, I found myself thinking about all the Thanksgivings past. The ones where my house was full, where I cooked for hours and the table was crowded and there was laughter and noise and life. Those days felt like they belonged to someone else. Some other version of me who didn't know yet how temporary happiness could be. How quickly everything you love can be taken away or pushed aside. I made tea and sat in the living room as darkness fell outside. I didn't turn on many lights. Just one lamp. The dimness felt appropriate. Matched the mood. I sat there in the semi-darkness, sipping tea that had gone lukewarm, and I let myself feel the full weight of my loneliness. This was my life now. This was what aging meant. Not just physical decline, but social decline. Becoming less relevant, less wanted, less necessary. I was 71 years old and I had decades potentially left to live. Decades of this. Of holidays alone. Of phone calls that never came. Of watching from the outside as my family lived their lives without me. The thought was almost unbearable. How do you live with that kind of loneliness? How do you fill days and months and years when you're no longer part of the world in any significant way? When the people you love most have decided they don't need you anymore. I thought about other elderly people I knew. The ones at the senior center. The ones I saw at the grocery store or the doctor's office. All of us trying to fill our time. Trying to stay busy. Trying to pretend we weren't slowly being forgotten by the world. Was that my future? Morning coffee at a senior center? Card games with people I didn't really connect with? Volunteer activities that felt more like obligations than purpose? That evening, around 7, I heard fireworks. Someone in the neighborhood was setting them off. Probably kids. Probably part of some family's Thanksgiving tradition. The sounds echoed in the quiet night, and each boom felt like it was mocking me. celebrating family and togetherness while I sat alone in the dark. I finally went to bed around 9. Not because I was tired, but because I wanted the day to be over. I wanted to stop feeling, stop thinking, just sleep and hopefully wake up to a day that felt less heavy. But I couldn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and my mind wouldn't shut off. It kept replaying the conversation with Rebecca. "You're exhausting, Mom." The words echoed in my head, over and over, and I wondered if she was right. If I'd spent years being too needy, too emotional, too demanding. If I'd driven her away with my own behavior. Maybe I had been a bad mother, not intentionally, but still bad. Maybe I'd smothered her with my love instead of letting her breathe. Maybe I'd made her feel guilty for growing up, for building a life separate from mine. Maybe every time I called or visited, she felt obligated rather than happy. Maybe my presence had become a burden she resented. The thoughts spiraled darker. Maybe I'd been a bad wife too. Maybe David had stayed with me out of duty rather than love. Maybe I'd exhausted him too with my emotions and needs. Maybe everyone who'd ever loved me had secretly wished I would just ask for less, be less, need less. I cried into my pillow that night. Quiet, hopeless tears. The kind that come from a place so deep inside you that they feel endless. And I thought about all the ways I'd failed. All the ways I wasn't enough or was too much. All the ways I'd disappointed people just by being myself. Morning came eventually. Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. I woke up feeling hollowed out, empty, like all the crying had drained something essential from me and left just a shell behind. I went through my morning routine mechanically. Coffee, shower, getting dressed. But it all felt pointless. What was I getting ready for? Another day of being alone? Another day of being forgotten? I thought about calling Rebecca, apologizing for being exhausting, promising to be different, to need less, to take up less space in her life. But what would be the point? She'd made her position clear. She wanted distance, and begging her to reconsider would only prove her point. That I was needy, that I couldn't respect boundaries, that I was too much. So I didn't call. I just sat there, in the quiet of my house, trying to figure out how to keep living when living felt so lonely. The weekend passed in a blur of emptiness. Saturday, Sunday, one day bleeding into the next with no distinction, no purpose, no meaning. I moved from room to room, made meals I barely ate, watched television programs I didn't care about, existed without really living. By Sunday evening, I'd made a decision. I couldn't keep doing this. Couldn't keep waiting for Rebecca to reach out. Couldn't keep torturing myself with hope that things would change. I needed to accept reality. My daughter didn't want a close relationship with me, and I needed to stop forcing it, stop expecting it, stop wanting it. It wasn't giving up, I told myself. It was accepting. There's a difference. Giving up is defeat. Accepting is wisdom. Or at least, that's what I tried to convince myself. I would stop calling Rebecca unless absolutely necessary. Stop initiating visits. Stop sending texts just to check in. I would respond if she reached out, but I wouldn't reach out first anymore. I would let her set the pace of our relationship. And if that pace was slow or nearly non-existent, so be it. At least then I'd stop feeling rejected over and over. At least then I'd know where I stood. It was a lonely decision. But loneliness was already my reality. This just meant accepting it instead of fighting it. And maybe in some twisted way, that would hurt less. Maybe acceptance would bring peace, even if it couldn't bring happiness. Monday morning, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. The kind of calm that comes after you've cried all the tears you have and made a difficult decision. I wasn't happy, but I wasn't actively suffering anymore either. I was just existing. And for now, that felt like enough. I went to the grocery store that day, bought food for the week, exchanged pleasantries with the cashier, drove home, put everything away. Normal activities, normal life. And I realized this was my future. Normal, quiet, solitary days, one after another, until I died. The thought didn't scare me as much as it probably should have. Maybe I was becoming numb, or maybe I was just accepting that this was how life ended for some people. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. Not surrounded by loving family, but quietly fading away while the world moved on without you. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a letter. Not to send, just to write. To get the words out of my head and onto paper where I could see them. Where they could exist outside of me. Dear Rebecca, I wrote. I don't know when things changed between us. Maybe it was gradual. Maybe I didn't notice until it was too late. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being someone you wanted around and became someone you tolerated. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I was too much. If I asked for too much. If I loved too much in a way that felt suffocating instead of supportive. I only ever wanted to be a good mother. But maybe I failed at that without realizing it. Maybe I drove you away with the very love I thought was binding us together. I want you to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include me. Even if having space from me is what you need. I want you to live your life fully and freely, without guilt or obligation. And so I'm letting go. Not because I love you less, but because I love you enough to give you what you're asking for. Space, distance, freedom from your exhausting mother. I hope someday you'll think of me kindly. I hope someday you'll tell Jackson and Lily about their grandmother in a way that makes me seem less like a burden and more like someone who loved them. But if you don't, I understand. You have to do what's best for you and your family. And apparently, what's best doesn't include me. I'll always love you. Even from a distance. Even in silence. Even if you never think of me at all. Love, Mom. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. I would never send it. Rebecca didn't need to read it. She already knew how I felt. And reading it would only make her feel guilty or defensive or annoyed. The letter was for me. To help me process. To help me let go. And maybe it worked. Because after writing it, I felt lighter. Not happy, but lighter. Like I'd set down a heavy weight I'd been carrying for too long. The weight of expectation. Of hope. Of wanting things to be different than they were. This was my life. This was my reality. And I needed to find a way to live with it. Not thrive. Not flourish. Just survive. Just get through each day without falling apart. And maybe eventually, it would stop hurting quite so much. Maybe eventually, I'd get used to the loneliness. Maybe eventually, it would just become normal. Expected. Background noise to the quiet soundtrack of my life. I looked around my house that evening. At all the empty rooms. At all the silence. And I thought about how to fill it. Not with family, because that wasn't an option. But with something. Anything. Hobbies. Activities. Routines that gave structure to otherwise shapeless days. Maybe I'd take up painting. Or gardening. Or learning a new language. Something to occupy my mind and my time. Something to make me feel like I was still growing. Still learning. Still living. Even if I was living alone. It wasn't the future I'd imagined. It wasn't the retirement I'd dreamed of. Surrounded by grandchildren. Involved in their lives. Important and needed and loved. But dreams don't always come true. And sometimes you have to build a life from the pieces you have. Even when those pieces feel broken and incomplete. So that's what I would do. I would build something new. Something different. A life that didn't revolve around Rebecca and the grandchildren. A life that was mine alone. Small, quiet, solitary. But mine. It wasn't much. But it was all I had. And I would make it enough. Somehow, someway. I would make it. December arrived with biting cold and early darkness. The kind of month that feels relentless. Gray skies day after day. Bare trees. Frozen ground. Everything stripped down to its essential bleakness. It matched my mood perfectly. I'd spent the past few weeks trying to build a new life for myself. Trying to find purpose outside of family. Trying to be okay with being alone. But it was harder than I'd thought it would be. I joined a watercolor class at the community center. Went twice a week. The instructor was patient and encouraging, and the other students were friendly enough. Mostly women around my age. Some widowed. Some divorced. All of us trying to fill our time with something productive. Something that made us feel less invisible. The problem was that I had no talent for painting. My trees looked like blobs. My landscapes looked like abstract messes. But the instructor insisted that art wasn't about talent. It was about expression. About putting your feelings on paper. And if that was true, then my paintings were very successful. Because they were chaotic and sad and confused. Just like me, I also started volunteering at the local library. shelving books, helping with the children's reading hour. It was something to do, something that got me out of the house. And the librarians were kind. They thanked me for my time, made me feel useful, even if it was just in this small, insignificant way. But none of it filled the emptiness. None of it replaced family. None of it made me feel less alone. I'd come home after my activities and the silence would hit me all over again. The emptiness. The awareness that no one was waiting for me. No one was wondering where I'd been. No one cared if I was home or not. I'd stuck to my decision about not reaching out to Rebecca. It had been 3 weeks since our Thanksgiving phone call. 3 weeks of silence. And she hadn't reached out either. Hadn't called. Hadn't texted. Hadn't seemed to notice that I'd stopped contacting her. Which told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't missed. I wasn't thought about. I was just gone. And no one cared. One Tuesday morning in mid-December, I was at the library for my volunteer shift when I overheard two women talking. They were standing in the biography section, looking at books, and their voices carried in the quiet space. "I'm so exhausted," one was saying. "My mother-in-law is coming for Christmas, staying for 2 weeks. 2 weeks! I don't know how I'm going to survive it." The other woman laughed sympathetically. "I know the feeling. Mine lives locally and wants to come over constantly. It's like she has no life of her own. She just wants to be involved in everything we do." Exactly. Mine is the same way. Always calling, always texting, always wanting to know what we're doing. It's suffocating. Have you tried setting boundaries? I've tried. But then she gets all hurt and emotional. And my husband feels guilty. So we just end up tolerating it. The things we do for family, right? They moved on. Still talking, their voices fading. But their words stayed with me, lodged in my chest like stones. That's how they talked about their mothers-in-law. As burdens, as obligations, as people to be tolerated rather than loved. And I wondered if that's how Rebecca talked about me. If she stood in grocery stores or coffee shops or book sections with her friends and complained about her needy, suffocating mother who just wouldn't back off. The thought made me feel sick. Made me want to disappear completely. If that's how I was seen, as someone exhausting who needed to be tolerated, then what was the point? What was the point of any relationship if it was built on obligation rather than genuine affection? I left the library early that day. Told the head librarian I wasn't feeling well. Which was true. I felt nauseous, shaky, overwhelmed by the realization that maybe I'd been deluding myself all these years. Maybe no one had ever really wanted me around. Maybe they'd all just been tolerating me out of duty, out of social obligation, out of guilt. I drove home and sat in my car in the driveway for a long time. Just sat there, staring at my house. My empty house. And I thought about how I'd lived 71 years on this earth and somehow ended up here. Alone, unwanted, invisible. It felt like a punishment. But for what? For loving too much? For needing too much? For being too much? When I finally went inside, the house felt different. Colder somehow. More hostile. Like even the walls were rejecting me. I turned up the heat, but it didn't help. The coldness was inside me. In my bones. In my heart. That evening, something broke inside me. I don't know what triggered it exactly. Maybe it was the overheard conversation. Maybe it was the accumulation of weeks of loneliness. Maybe it was just a realization that this was my life now and it wasn't going to get better. But whatever it was, I fell apart. I sat on my bedroom floor and cried. Not the quiet, dignified tears I'd been allowing myself, but loud, ugly, desperate crying. The kind that makes your whole body shake. The kind that comes from a place so deep you didn't even know it existed. I cried for hours, until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen and I had nothing left inside me. Just emptiness. Just hollow, aching emptiness. When the crying finally stopped, I felt strange, detached, like I was watching myself from outside my body. I looked around my bedroom at the bed I slept in alone. At the dresser still holding David's things that I couldn't bring myself to get rid of. At the photos of a family that no longer felt like mine, and I thought about how easy it would be to just stop. To stop trying. To stop fighting. To stop existing. The thought scared me. Not because I was seriously considering it, but because it had even entered my mind. Because for a moment, just a moment, Ending everything seemed easier than continuing to live like this. And that's when I knew I needed help. Real help. Professional help. Because I couldn't do this alone anymore. I couldn't keep pretending I was okay when I was so far from okay. The next morning, I called my doctor, asked for a referral to a therapist. The receptionist seemed unsurprised, as if elderly people calling for mental health support was a regular occurrence. Maybe it was. Maybe there were lots of us out there, quietly falling apart, quietly drowning in loneliness, quietly wondering if anyone would notice if we just disappeared. I got an appointment for the following week. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, specialized in geriatric mental health and family issues. The receptionist's voice was kind when she gave me the information. Maybe she could hear the desperation in my voice. Maybe she knew I was barely holding it together. In the days between making the appointment and actually going, I existed in a strange state of limbo, going through motions, eating when I remembered to, sleeping fitfully, spending long hours sitting and staring at nothing. The house felt like a cage, but going outside felt impossible. So I just stayed inside, trapped between four walls with my thoughts eating me alive. Saturday came, 4 days before my therapy appointment. I was sitting at the kitchen table, drinking cold coffee and staring at the calendar on the wall, when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but some automatic reflex made me pick it up. It was Rebecca. "Hi, Mom." Her voice sounded bright, cheerful, as if nothing was wrong, as if we hadn't gone nearly a month without speaking, as if Thanksgiving hadn't happened. "Hello, Rebecca. How are you?" How was I? I was falling apart. I was barely functioning. I was having thoughts that scared me, but I couldn't say any of that. So I just said, "I'm fine." "Good. Listen, I'm calling because we're having a Christmas party. Just family and a few close friends. And I wanted to invite you." I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process what she'd just said. She was inviting me to something. After weeks of silence. After Thanksgiving. After telling me I was exhausting. She was inviting me to her Christmas party. "Mom? You there?" "I'm here. So can you come? It's December 23rd. Starts at 6. December 23rd. 2 days before Christmas. Which meant I probably wouldn't see them on actual Christmas. This party was my consolation prize. My token inclusion so she could tell herself she'd invited me to something. "I don't know if I can make it," I said. "What do you mean? Do you have other plans?" I could have lied, could have said yes, could have maintained some dignity. But I was too tired to lie, too empty to care about pride. "No, I just don't know if I should come." There was a pause. "Why not?" "Because I don't want to be tolerated, Rebecca. I don't want to be the obligation you check off your list. The exhausting mother you invite out of guilt." Another pause. Longer this time. "Mom, I didn't mean what I said on Thanksgiving. I was stressed. I said it wrong. Did you? Or did you finally say what you've been thinking for years?" "That's not fair, isn't it? Rebecca, you didn't even notice I stopped calling. It's been almost a month and you never reached out. Not once. Doesn't that tell you something? I've been busy, you're always busy. But you make time for the things that matter to you. And apparently, I don't matter enough." "That's not true." "Then why does it feel true? Why do I feel like I'm constantly begging for scraps of attention from my own daughter? Why do I feel like I'm too much and not enough at the same time?" I could hear her breathing on the other end. Could hear her trying to find words. But what could she say? How could she deny what we both knew was true? "I think," she said finally, her voice quiet, "that we need to have a real conversation. Not on the phone. In person. Can we do that?" "What's the point?" "The point is that you're my mother. And I love you. Even if I'm bad at showing it sometimes." I wanted to believe her. Wanted to think that love was still there underneath all the distance and disappointment. But I'd been hurt too many times. Been rejected too many ways. And I didn't know if I could handle another wound. "I'll think about it," I said. "Please come to the party, Mom. Please." "I'll think about it," I repeated. And then I hung up. I sat there for a long time after that call, turning it over in my mind, trying to decide if I was being manipulated or if Rebecca genuinely wanted to repair things. I sat there for a long time after that call, turning it over in my mind, trying to decide if I was being manipulated or if Rebecca genuinely wanted to repair things. Part of me wanted to go to the party, wanted to believe that this was an olive branch, a chance to rebuild. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt too many times, wanted to protect myself, wanted to say no, wanted to prove that I didn't need her as much as she thought I did. But the truth was, I did need her. She was my daughter, my only child. And despite everything, I loved her. I'd always love her. That was the curse and the blessing of being a mother. Your love doesn't stop just because it's not returned the way you need it to be. The days leading up to my therapy appointment were heavy. I went through my routines mechanically. Painting class, library volunteer shift, grocery shopping. But I was barely present. Just a body going through motions while my mind was somewhere else. Somewhere dark and confused and scared. When the day of my appointment finally arrived, I almost didn't go. I sat in my car in the parking lot of Dr. Mitchell's office building for 15 minutes, trying to convince myself to walk inside. It felt like admitting defeat, like announcing to the world that I couldn't handle my own life, that I was weak, broken, failing. But eventually, I went in, because staying broken felt worse than admitting I needed help. Dr. Mitchell was younger than I expected, maybe late 40s. She had kind eyes and a gentle voice and an office that felt warm and safe. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, tissues on every surface, as if she expected people to cry. And I did cry. Almost immediately, she asked me to tell her what brought me in. And I did. I told her everything. About David dying. About Rebecca pulling away. About feeling unwanted and invisible. About the Thanksgiving that didn't include me. About the phone call where my daughter told me I was exhausting. About the loneliness that felt like it was suffocating me. About the thoughts I'd had on my bedroom floor that scared me. And she listened. Really listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't judge. Just let me pour it all out until I had nothing left to say. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That sounds incredibly painful and isolating. And I want you to know that what you're feeling is valid. It makes sense given what you've experienced." Those words, "what you're feeling is valid," made me cry again. Because no one had said that to me. Everyone had told me to give Rebecca space, to not take it personally, to understand that young families need independence. But no one had acknowledged that it hurt. That rejection from your own child, no matter the reason, is one of the deepest wounds a person can experience. Dr. Mitchell asked me questions. About my relationship with Rebecca when she was younger. About my expectations for my later years. About how I defined my own worth. About what I wanted my life to look like going forward. I didn't have good answers for most of her questions. I'd spent so much of my life defining myself through my relationships with others, wife, mother, grandmother, that I didn't know who I was outside of those roles. I didn't know what I wanted because I'd never really thought about it. I'd always thought about what my family needed, what would make them happy. But what about me? What made me happy? I didn't know. And that realization was almost as painful as the loneliness. Dr. Mitchell gave me homework. She asked me to start a journal, not about Rebecca or my family, but about me, what I felt, what I wanted, what brought me joy, even in small doses. She said we needed to rebuild my sense of self. That I needed to learn that I was a person worthy of love and respect independent of my role as a mother. It sounded good in theory, but I wasn't sure I believed it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a blank notebook in front of me. Dr. Mitchell's homework. Write about what makes you happy. I stared at the empty page for a long time. Tried to think of something, anything, but my mind was blank. What made me happy? Spending time with my grandchildren. But they didn't want to spend time with me. Talking to my daughter, but she found me exhausting. Cooking for my family, but they didn't eat what I made. Everything that had brought me joy was tied to people who didn't want me around anymore. So what was left? What did I have that was mine alone? I thought about the watercolor class. I wasn't good at it, but there was something peaceful about mixing colors, about watching paint spread across paper, about creating something, even if it was messy and imperfect. That was mine. That small thing. That counted, didn't it? I wrote it down. Watercolors make me happy, even though I'm bad at them. I thought about my morning coffee, how I like to sit by the window and watch the birds at the feeder in my backyard. How there was something calming about that quiet ritual. That was mine too. I wrote it down. Morning coffee by the window. Slowly, I started finding small things. Walking in the park near my house. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery downtown. Old movies that reminded me of simpler times. Reading before bed. The way my house looked when afternoon sun came through the curtains. They were small things. Insignificant things. But they were mine. And maybe that was a start. Maybe happiness didn't have to be big and dramatic. Maybe it could be small and quiet. Maybe I could build a life from these tiny moments of peace. The next day, I made a decision about Rebecca's Christmas party. I would go. Not because I was desperate for her approval or because I couldn't survive without her, but because I wanted to. Because despite everything, I still wanted a relationship with my daughter. And relationships require effort. Require showing up, even when it's hard. Even when you're scared of being hurt again. But I would go on my own terms. I would go as someone who was valuable and worthwhile independent of whether she appreciated me or not. I would go because I chose to, not because I needed to. And if it went badly, if I was made to feel unwelcome or exhausting or like a burden, I would leave. I would protect myself. I would choose myself. It was a small shift in thinking, but it felt important. It felt like the beginning of something. Not healing exactly, but maybe the possibility of healing. I called Rebecca the next day, told her I would come to the party. She sounded genuinely happy, relieved even, said she was glad, said we'd have a chance to talk. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a tiny spark of something that might have been hope. The days between that phone call and the party passed in a strange sort of limbo. I was nervous, scared of what might happen, scared of being rejected again, but also determined to show up, to try. To give this one more chance, I went to my watercolor class, painted a winter scene, bare trees against gray sky. It was melancholy but honest. The instructor said it had feeling, that sometimes the sad paintings are the most powerful because they're the most true. I went to the library, shelved books, read to children who listened with wide eyes and open hearts. They didn't care that I was old or sad or lonely. They just cared about the story, about the voices I did. About the pictures on the pages. With them, I was enough. I was wanted, even if just for that hour. I saw Dr. Mitchell again, told her about my decision to go to the party. She asked me what I was hoping for, and I thought about it, really thought about it. I'm hoping for honesty, I said finally. I'm hoping Rebecca and I can have a real conversation, not just surface pleasantries, but real talk about what's wrong and how to fix it. And what if she's not ready for that conversation? Dr. Mitchell asked gently. What if she just wants you there to check a box? To feel like she's done her daughterly duty? Then I'll know, I said. And I can decide what to do with that information. But I need to try. I need to know if there's anything real left between us or if it's all just obligation and guilt. Dr. Mitchell nodded. That's fair. Just remember, you can't control how she shows up. You can only control how you show up. Go with integrity, with honesty, with self-respect, and whatever happens, you'll know you did your best. Those words stayed with me. You can only control how you show up. It was true. I couldn't make Rebecca love me the way I wanted to be loved. Couldn't make her value me or need me or want me around. All I could do was be honest about what I needed, be clear about my boundaries, and then let her decide how she wanted to respond. December 23rd arrived faster than I expected. The day of the party. I spent the morning preparing. Not just physically choosing clothes, doing my hair, but emotionally. Reminding myself of why I was going. What I hoped for. What I would accept and what I wouldn't. I chose a simple outfit. Nothing too fancy. I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard. But nothing too casual either. I wanted to look put together. Dignified. Like a woman who valued herself. Even if others didn't. I arrived at Rebecca's house at 6:15. Fashionably late. Not so late it was rude, but late enough that other guests would already be there. I didn't want to be the first one. Didn't want that awkward arrival where it's just family trying to figure out what to say to each other. There were cars in the driveway. The house was lit up, warm light spilling from the windows. I could see people moving inside, hear the faint sound of music and laughter. And I sat in my car for a moment, gathering my courage. reminding myself that I was choosing to be here, that I had value, that I deserved respect. I walked to the front door and rang the bell. Michael answered. He smiled, seemed genuinely pleased to see me. Hey, Mom! Come in. Come in. Let me take your coat. I stepped inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine. Christmas decorations everywhere. A tree in the corner of the living room, covered in lights and ornaments. And people. Maybe 20 people scattered throughout the space. Some I recognized, Michael's parents, a few of Rebecca's friends. Others I didn't know. Rebecca came over immediately. She was wearing a red sweater and looked tired but happy. Mom, you came! She hugged me. A real hug, not one of those stiff, obligatory ones. And for a moment, I let myself believe that maybe this would be okay. Maybe we could fix this. Thanks for inviting me, I said. Of course. I'm glad you're here. Come on, let me introduce you to some people. She led me around the room. Introduced me to friends I hadn't met before. Neighbors, Michael's colleagues. Everyone was polite, smiled, said nice things. But I felt out of place, like I was the odd piece that didn't quite fit. The elderly mother at a party for people decades younger than me. I found a corner and settled in with a glass of wine. Watched a party happen around me. Jackson and Lily ran past at one point, barely acknowledging me, too caught up in whatever game they were playing with other kids. Rebecca was busy hosting, making sure everyone had drinks, laughing at someone's joke, looking effortlessly social in a way I'd never managed to be. Michael's mother, Patricia, came over and sat beside me. We'd met several times before but had never really connected. She was one of those women who seemed perpetually cheerful, always smiling, always seeing the bright side. How are you, dear? She asked. I'm fine, I said automatically. She studied me for a moment. You look sad. Her directness surprised me. I wasn't used to people being that honest. I suppose I am a bit. The holidays can be hard, she said, especially after losing a spouse. David, wasn't it? Yes, it's been 7 years, but sometimes it still feels fresh. She nodded. I can imagine. I don't know what I'd do if I lost Robert. He's been my partner for 43 years. 43 years. David and I had 42 before cancer took him. All those years of partnership. And then nothing. Just empty space where a person used to be. Do you have other children? Patricia asked. Besides Rebecca? No, just her. That must make it harder. When they grow up and get busy with their own lives, it does, I admitted. And then, before I could stop myself, I added, sometimes I feel like I don't fit anymore. Like there's no space for me in her life. Patricia looked at me with sympathy. I think a lot of parents feel that way. My 3 kids are all busy with their own families. Sometimes weeks go by without hearing from them. But that's life, isn't it? We raise them to be independent, and then we miss them when they actually are. How do you deal with it? I asked. The loneliness? She smiled. I stay busy. I have my bridge club and my book group and volunteer work. I spend time with Robert. We travel when we can. And I try to remember that my kids' independence is a sign I did my job well. Even when it hurts, it was kind advice. Logical advice. But it didn't make the hurt less real. Rebecca came over then. Mom, can we talk? In private? My heart jumped. This was it. The conversation I'd been hoping for and dreading in equal measure. I followed her upstairs to her bedroom. She closed the door behind us. We stood there, facing each other, and the air felt heavy with everything unsaid. I want to apologize, Rebecca said, for Thanksgiving, for the things I said, for making you feel unwanted. Okay, I said carefully. I was stressed and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair. Was it true though? Do you find me exhausting? She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. Sometimes, she admitted, but that's on me, not you. I think I've been struggling with having you around because it reminds me that I'm not doing it perfectly. Being a mother, running a household, managing everything. And when you're here, I feel judged, even when you're not actually judging me. I'm not trying to judge you, Rebecca. I'm trying to help. I know. But your help feels like criticism sometimes, like I'm not measuring up to the mother you were. Her words hit me hard, because I had compared. Maybe not out loud, But in my head, I'd looked at how she parented and thought about how I would have done it differently. How I did do it differently. And maybe she'd sensed that. Maybe I hadn't been as subtle as I thought. "I'm sorry," I said. "I never meant to make you feel that way." "I know you didn't. But Mom, you have to understand. I need to figure out how to be a mother in my own way. Not your way, my way. And I can't do that with you always there. Always offering suggestions. Always doing things before I can do them myself." "So what are you saying? That you don't want me around at all?" "No, I'm saying I need boundaries. I need you to let me ask for help instead of always offering it. I need you to respect that Michael and I are doing things our own way, even if it's not how you would do it. I need you to have your own life so you're not so focused on mine." It was harsh, but it was honest. And I'd ask for honesty. "I'm trying to build my own life," I said quietly. "It's just hard when you're 71 and alone and the people you love most don't seem to need you anymore." Rebecca's expression softened. "I do need you, Mom, just differently than you need me. And I think that's where the tension is. You need me more than I need you. And that's not your fault. But it's also not something I can fix." And there it was. The truth I'd been avoiding. I needed her more than she needed me. And that imbalance was killing our relationship. Because need breeds resentment. And resentment breeds distance. And distance breeds loneliness. "So what do we do?" I asked. "I think we need to reset. Start fresh. With clear expectations. I'll invite you to things. But you have to wait for invitations instead of assuming you're included. And when you're here, you have to let me be the parent. Let me make mistakes. Let me figure things out without jumping in to fix everything. And in return, I'll try to include you more. Try to make sure you don't feel forgotten. Try to call more often, even if just to chat." It wasn't what I wanted, but it was something. It was more honest than we'd been in years. And honesty, even painful honesty, was better than the silent resentment that had been growing between us. "Okay," I said. "I'll try. That's all I'm asking." We hugged. And this time it felt different. Not perfect. Not healed. But real. Like we were actually trying instead of just going through motions. When we went back downstairs, the party was still going. But something had shifted in me. I didn't feel quite as out of place. Didn't feel quite as unwanted. I had clarity now. I knew where I stood. And while it wasn't ideal, it was honest. And I could work with honest. I stayed at the party for another hour after my conversation with Rebecca. Mingled a bit more. Talked to a few people. Even laughed at someone's story about a Christmas disaster involving a burned turkey. But I was tired. Emotionally exhausted. And I knew I needed to leave before I fell apart in front of everyone. I found Rebecca in the kitchen. She was loading the dishwasher, her back to me. "I think I'm going to head home," I said. She turned, looking concerned. "Already? Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Just tired. It's been a long day, okay? Thanks for coming, Mom. It meant a lot. Thank you for inviting me. And for the talk earlier, of course. We should do this more often. Actually talk instead of just dancing around things." "I'd like that." I said goodbye to Michael and a few others on my way out. The kids were still playing, too absorbed to notice I was leaving. And that was okay. I wasn't leaving angry or hurt. Just ready to be home. Ready to process everything that had happened. The drive home was quiet. Dark roads. Empty streets. Most people were inside with their families, celebrating the approaching holiday. And I was alone in my car, heading back to my empty house. But somehow, it didn't feel as devastating as it had a few weeks ago. Something had changed. Not everything. Not enough. But something. When I got home, I made myself tea and sat at the kitchen table with my journal. Dr. Mitchell's homework. I'd been doing it most nights now. Writing about my day. My feelings. My small moments of happiness. It was helping. Slowly. Incrementally. But helping. I wrote about the party. About the conversation with Rebecca. About how honesty hurt but also healed in a strange way. About how I was learning that love doesn't always look the way you want it to. That sometimes people love you but still need distance. That needing space doesn't mean not caring. I wrote about Patricia, Michael's mother, and how she seemed to have figured out how to be content with less contact from her children. How she'd built a life that didn't revolve around them. how she seemed happy, or at least at peace. And I wondered if I could learn to be like that. If I could learn to be satisfied with occasional visits and phone calls instead of the constant closeness I craved. It felt like giving up on something I'd always believed in. The idea that family is everything, that blood ties are the most important, that your children will always be your children, close and connected and essential. But maybe that was a fantasy. Maybe the reality was more complicated. Maybe family could be important without being everything. Maybe I could still love Rebecca deeply while also building a life that didn't center entirely around her. The question was, what would that life look like? What did I want for myself, separate from my role as mother and grandmother? I thought about the things I'd written in my journal over the past couple weeks. The small things that brought me joy. Watercolors, morning coffee, walking in the park, reading. Could I build a life from those tiny moments? Could I make them bigger? More central? Maybe I could take an art class at the community college. A real one. Not just a beginner sessions at the senior center. Maybe I could travel. Not far, I didn't have unlimited money, but to nearby places I'd always wanted to see. Maybe I could volunteer more. Find causes I cared about and pour my energy into them. Maybe I could make new friends. Real friends. Not just acquaintances from activities. The possibilities felt fragile. Like if I examined them too closely, they'd dissolve. But they were there. Faint outlines of a different kind of life. A life that wasn't about waiting for Rebecca to call or hoping for invitations or measuring my worth by how much my family needed me. Christmas came 2 days later. I spent it alone as expected. But this time, it didn't feel quite as terrible. I cooked a small meal, just chicken, not turkey. I watched old movies. I called my sister and talked for an hour. She asked about Rebecca, about the party, and I told her the truth. That we'd talked, that we'd established boundaries, that it wasn't perfect but it was honest. I'm proud of you, my sister said, for going to the party, for having that conversation. I know it wasn't easy, it wasn't, but I think it was necessary. What are you going to do now? I don't know exactly, but I'm trying to figure out how to build a life that feels full even when I'm alone. That's brave. Was it brave? I didn't feel brave. I felt like I was just surviving, barely holding it together. But maybe survival was a kind of bravery. Maybe getting up each day and trying, even when everything felt hard and pointless, was brave. Rebecca called me on Christmas afternoon, just to check in, to say Merry Christmas. We talked for maybe 15 minutes. It was pleasant, surface level, but it was something. And I didn't push for more. Didn't ask when I could come visit. Didn't try to invite myself over. I just accepted what she was offering and let it be enough. After we hung up, I felt okay. Not happy exactly, but okay. And okay was progress. The week between Christmas and New Year's was quiet. I went to my regular activities. Watercolor class. Library volunteering. I saw Dr. Mitchell again. Told her about the party. About the conversation with Rebecca. About the new boundaries. How do you feel about those boundaries? She asked, conflicted. I admitted. Part of me is relieved to have clarity, to know what's expected. But another part of me is sad, because it means accepting that my relationship with my daughter will never be what I wanted it to be. Grief is appropriate, Dr. Mitchell said. You're grieving the loss of something you hoped for. That's real and valid. But accepting reality doesn't mean giving up hope entirely. It just means hoping for different things. More realistic things. Like what? Like a relationship that's honest even if it's not as close as you'd like. Like finding fulfillment in places outside of family. Like building a life that feels meaningful to you, regardless of how much your daughter is involved in it. I thought about that. About redefining what I hoped for. It felt like lowering my expectations. Like settling. But maybe it was actually wisdom. Maybe understanding what's possible and finding peace with it was better than constantly longing for something that would never materialize. I want to feel happy again, I said. I want to wake up in the morning and feel like life is worth living. Not just surviving, but actually living. How do I get there? Slowly, Dr. Mitchell said. With intention. By making small choices every day that prioritize your well-being. By trying new things. By connecting with people who appreciate you. By being gentle with yourself when it's hard. You've spent 70 years defining yourself primarily through your relationships with others. Learning to define yourself independently is going to take time. But you can do it. You're already doing it. Was I? Sometimes it felt like I was making progress. Other times it felt like I was just treading water, barely keeping my head above the surface. But I suppose that was okay. Progress wasn't linear. Healing wasn't constant. Some days would be better than others. And I just had to keep showing up, even on the hard days. New Year's Eve arrived. Another holiday alone. But this one didn't carry the same weight as Thanksgiving or Christmas. Maybe because New Year's was about looking forward rather than reflecting on what you had or didn't have. It was about possibility, about fresh starts, about choosing to believe that things could be different, even if just a little bit. I stayed up until midnight. Not at a party or with family, but alone in my living room with a glass of wine and the television showing celebrations from around the country. When the countdown started, I found myself making resolutions. Not the typical ones about losing weight or saving money, but deeper ones. Promises to myself about how I wanted to live this year. I will build a life that doesn't depend on others for meaning. I will find joy in small moments. I will be honest about what I need and accept what others can give. I will forgive myself for not being perfect. I will keep trying, even when it's hard. When midnight struck, I raised my glass to the empty room and whispered, "To new beginnings." It felt silly, melodramatic, but also true. This was a new beginning, not because everything was fixed or because I'd figured it all out, but because I was choosing to believe that change was possible, that I could create a different kind of life. That being 71 and alone didn't have to mean being miserable. January came with its typical cold and grayness, but I felt different. Lighter somehow, less burdened by expectation. I continued my therapy sessions with Dr. Mitchell, continued my journal writing, continued showing up to my activities, and I started adding new things. I signed up for a pottery class at the community college. I joined a book club at the library. I started walking regularly with a woman I'd met at the senior center. Her name was Linda. She was a widow too. We didn't have a lot in common, but we both needed companionship. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes just having someone to walk beside, someone who understands loneliness, is all you need. Rebecca called every couple of weeks, usually just to chat for a few minutes, sometimes to share news about the kids. I didn't call her unless I had a specific reason. I was honoring the boundary she'd set, waiting for invitations instead of inserting myself. It was hard, but it was also freeing in a way. I didn't have to worry anymore about whether I was being too much, because I was letting her set the pace. In mid-January, she invited me over for dinner. Just family, no party, no crowd, just us. I said yes. The dinner was nice. Awkward at times, but nice. Jackson and Lily were a bit more talkative than they'd been at the party. They told me about school, about their friends, about a video game they were obsessed with. I listened, asked questions. Didn't offer unsolicited advice or criticize anything. Just listened. After dinner, Rebecca and I did dishes together while Michael watched TV with the kids. We worked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Rebecca said, "This was nice, having you here." It was. I agreed. I think we're figuring it out, how to do this. I think so too. It wasn't a breakthrough moment. Wasn't a dramatic reconciliation. Just a small step forward. But small steps counted. Small steps added up to bigger changes over time. I left that evening feeling hopeful. Not that everything would go back to how it used to be, but that maybe we could find a new way of being family. One that worked for both of us. One that was honest and respectful and didn't require anyone to sacrifice their own well-being. February brought more of the same. Regular routines. Small joys. Occasional visits with Rebecca. Therapy sessions where I continued unpacking my feelings and learning to value myself independent of my relationships. It was slow work, sometimes frustrating, but it was work worth doing. One afternoon at my watercolor class, the instructor announced that the community center was having an art show in March. She encouraged all of us to submit work. I immediately thought no. My paintings weren't good enough. No one would want to look at them. But then I thought about what Dr. Mitchell had been saying, about trying new things, about being brave, about putting myself out there even when it was scary. So I said yes. I'd submit a painting, not because I thought I'd win anything or because I thought people would be impressed, but because doing it would be a statement, a declaration that I was a person with interests and talents and something to offer. Even if that something was just a mediocre watercolor, I spent the next few weeks working on a piece specifically for the show. I painted a window, a view from inside looking out. Through the window, you could see a garden, flowers, sunlight, life. But the window itself was slightly ajar, like someone could step through it if they chose to. Like the barrier between inside and outside wasn't solid, wasn't permanent, the symbolism wasn't subtle. But it was true. That's how I felt. Like I'd been stuck inside for so long, looking at life through a window. And now I was learning that I could open that window. I could step through. I could participate instead of just observing. When I submitted the painting, the instructor smiled. "This is beautiful," she said. "There's real feeling in it." I didn't know about beautiful, but there was definitely feeling. And maybe that was enough. The art show was in mid-March. By then, nearly 3 months had passed since that devastating Thanksgiving. 3 months of hard work, of therapy, of learning to be alone without being lonely, of rebuilding my relationship with Rebecca on more honest terms, of discovering small things that brought me joy. I invited Rebecca to the art show, not expecting her to come, just offering. And to my surprise, she said yes. She'd bring the kids, make an afternoon of it. The day of the show, I was nervous. Not about seeing Rebecca, that had gotten easier, but about having my work displayed. About people looking at something I'd created and judging it. But I went anyway. Because being brave meant showing up even when you were scared. The community center had transformed their multi-purpose room into a gallery. Paintings hung on temporary walls, sculptures on tables, pottery on shelves. And there in the corner was my window painting, number 43, with a little card that said my name and the title I'd given it. Opening, I stood in front of it for a long time, looking at this thing I'd created, this representation of where I was in my life. And I felt proud, not because it was perfect, it wasn't, but because it was real, because it said something true about me. Rebecca arrived with Jackson and Lily around too. They walked around the gallery, looking at the different pieces. The kids were more interested than I'd expected. They pointed out things they liked, asked questions. And when they got to my painting, Lily said, "That's pretty, Grandma. Thank you, sweetheart. Is that what it looks like from your house?" Jackson asked. "Sort of. I imagine what I'd like to see when I look out my window. I like the flowers." Lily said, "Me too." We stood there together, looking at my painting, and I felt something shift. Not dramatically, just slightly, like a door opening, like light coming in, like possibility. After the art show, we went for ice cream, all of us, and we talked about school, about Rebecca's job, about my classes. Normal family conversation, easy, comfortable, not forced. And when we said goodbye that afternoon, I didn't feel the usual ache, the usual longing for more. I felt satisfied, content with what I'd been given. With this afternoon, with this small but meaningful connection, spring arrived slowly that year. The kind of spring that teases you. A warm day followed by 3 cold ones. Flowers starting to bloom and then getting hit with frost. But eventually, steadily, winter released its grip. The days grew longer, the sun stronger, life returning to the world. I felt like I was in my own spring, slowly thawing, slowly coming back to life after a long cold season. It had been 6 months since that awful Thanksgiving. 6 months of therapy and hard work and learning to live differently. And while I wouldn't say I was healed, healing isn't something that happens completely. I was better, significantly better. My relationship with Rebecca had settled into a new rhythm. We talked on the phone every couple of weeks. I visited maybe once a month, sometimes more if there was a special event. But I'd stopped expecting constant contact, stopped measuring her love by how often she reached out. Instead, I focused on the quality of our interactions rather than the quantity. And that shift in perspective made everything feel less painful. I'd also built a life that felt fuller. My pottery class had become a favorite. There was something deeply satisfying about working with clay, about shaping something with your hands. about creating vessels that could hold things. I wasn't great at it, but I was improving. And more importantly, I enjoyed it. I'd made friends too. Real friends, not just acquaintances. Linda, my walking partner, had become someone I genuinely looked forward to seeing. We walked 3 times a week now, talked about everything: our childhoods, our marriages, our struggles with aging and loneliness. She understood. She got it in a way people who hadn't experienced this particular kind of loss couldn't. I'd also become close with a woman from my book club named Margaret. She was 75, sharp as a tack, with opinions on everything. We didn't always agree, but I liked that about her. She challenged me, made family rejects grandmother. I'd also become close with a woman from my book club named Margaret. She was 75, sharp as a tack, with opinions on everything. We didn't always agree, but I liked that about her. She challenged me, made me think, made me laugh. We'd started meeting for coffee on Fridays, just the two of us, to discuss whatever book we were reading and dissect everything from politics to recipes to the meaning of life. These friendships felt different from the polite acquaintanceships I'd had before. They felt real, reciprocal, like we were actually choosing to spend time together rather than just filling lonely hours. And that distinction mattered. It made me feel valued in a way I hadn't felt in years. Dr. Mitchell and I were still meeting, though less frequently now. Once every 3 weeks instead of weekly. She said I was doing well, that I'd made significant progress, that I'd learned to define myself outside of my role as a mother and grandmother. And while I still had moments of sadness and loneliness, they didn't consume me anymore. They were just part of the landscape, part of being human. One Tuesday in April, I was working in my garden when Rebecca called. She sounded stressed. I could hear it in her voice before she even said anything substantive. "Mom, I need to ask you something." "Okay." "Michael has to go out of town for work next week, Wednesday through Friday, and I have a huge project due at work, and the kids have school and activities, and I'm completely overwhelmed. Would you be able to come stay with us? Help with the kids?" My first instinct was to say yes immediately, to jump at the chance to be needed. But I paused, thought about it, made sure I was saying yes because I actually wanted to help, not because I was desperate for her approval. "I'd be happy to help," I said. "What days exactly?" "Wednesday afternoon through Friday evening." "I know it's a lot to ask." "It's fine, Rebecca. I'm happy to do it." "Are you sure?" "I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing. You're asking. There's a difference." I could hear the relief in her voice. "Thank you, Mom. Seriously, you're a lifesaver." When I hung up, I felt good. Not desperately happy like I would have felt 6 months ago. Just good, satisfied. She'd asked for help and I'd given it. Not because I needed to prove my worth, but because I wanted to support my daughter. Because that's what family does. They help each other. And this time, it didn't feel one-sided. It felt balanced. The week I spent at Rebecca's house was eye-opening. I saw her life in a way I hadn't seen it before. How truly overwhelming it was. Work deadlines and school schedules and extracurricular activities and household management. She was juggling so much. And for the first time, I understood why my presence had sometimes felt like one more thing to manage rather than helpful. I tried to be useful without being intrusive. I drove the kids to school and picked them up, made dinner, helped with homework. But I didn't reorganize her kitchen or critique her parenting or offer unsolicited advice. I just did what was asked of me and stayed out of the way otherwise. And it worked. By Friday evening, when Michael came home and I was getting ready to leave, Rebecca hugged me tight. "Thank you so much, Mom. I don't know what I would have done without you this week." "You're welcome. I was happy to help. The kids really enjoyed having you here. Jackson said you helped him with his math homework better than I do." I laughed. "I doubt that. But I'm glad I could help. We should do this more often. Not just when I'm desperate, but just because. I'd like that. And I meant it. Because it had been nice. Not perfect, there were still awkward moments. Still areas where our approaches to things differed, but nice. We were figuring out how to coexist. How to be mother and daughter and grandmother and granddaughter in ways that worked for both of us. Driving home that Friday evening, I felt more hopeful about our relationship than I had in years. It wasn't what I'd originally wanted. It wasn't the constant closeness I'd once craved. But it was real. It was honest. And it was built on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. May brought warmer weather and longer days. I started spending more time outside, working in my garden, walking in the park, sitting on my front porch with a book. The physical world felt more alive. And so did I. Linda invited me to join her for a weekend trip to the coast. Just the two of us. She wanted to visit some art galleries and walk on the beach and have a change of scenery. My first instinct was to say no, to make up an excuse, to stay safely in my routine. But then I thought about what Dr. Mitchell had said about being brave, about trying new things, about living instead of just existing. So I said yes. The weekend was wonderful. We stayed in a small bed and breakfast near the water, spent our days exploring coastal towns and our evenings talking over wine. Linda told me about her marriage, about her late husband, about the struggles she'd had with her own children after he died. And I told her my story, all of it, the rejection, the loneliness, the slow process of rebuilding. You're doing better than you think, Linda said on our last evening there. We were sitting on the porch of the bed and breakfast, watching the sun set over the ocean. When I first met you, you seemed so sad, so defeated. But now you seem lighter, stronger. I feel stronger, I said. I didn't think I would. 6 months ago, I was in such a dark place. I didn't know if I'd survive it. But I did. And not just survive, I actually built something. A life that feels meaningful even when I'm alone. That's not nothing, Linda said. A lot of people never figure that out. They just keep waiting for someone else to make them happy. But you took responsibility for your own happiness. That's huge. Her words stayed with me. The idea that I'd taken responsibility for my own happiness. I'd never thought about it that way. But she was right. I'd stopped waiting for Rebecca to fix things. Stopped waiting for someone else to make my life feel worthwhile. I'd done it myself. And that felt powerful. When I got home from that trip, I felt energized, inspired. I signed up for a weekend workshop on nature photography. I'd never been interested in photography before, but I wanted to try something new, wanted to keep expanding my world. June arrived, and with it, Jackson's birthday. He was turning 12. Rebecca called to invite me to his party, a small family thing at the house. Nothing big, and I went. Brought a gift. I thought he'd actually like a gift card to the video game store he loved. And he genuinely seemed happy to see me. Gave me a real hug, not a reluctant one. Showed me the new game he'd been playing. Let me watch him play for a bit even though I didn't understand what was happening on screen. At one point during the party, I was standing in Rebecca's backyard, watching the kids run around. When Michael came over, "Thanks for coming," he said. "Jackson was really happy you're here. I wouldn't have missed it." Rebecca talks about how much better things are between you two. How you've both been working on it. We have. It wasn't easy, but I think we've found a better balance. I appreciate that. I know some of it was on me too, not being more involved when things were tense. I should have said something sooner. It was a surprising admission. Michael had always seemed so neutral, so careful not to take sides. But I appreciated him acknowledging his role. We all did what we thought was best at the time, I said. The important thing is that we're here now, that we're trying. He nodded, and we stood there together in comfortable silence, watching the kids play. Later that evening, after I'd gone home, Rebecca sent me a text. "Thanks for coming today. It meant a lot to all of us." I read the text several times. All of us, not just Jackson. All of them. I mattered to them. Not in the overwhelming, all-consuming way I'd once needed to matter, but in a real, genuine way. And that felt like enough. July brought a heat wave. The kind of oppressive heat that makes you want to stay inside with air conditioning and cold drinks. But I pushed myself to stay active, to keep going to my classes and meeting my friends and living my life even when it was uncomfortable. One evening, Margaret invited me to a dinner party at her house. She was having several people over, friends from various parts of her life, and she wanted me there. I almost said no. Social gatherings with strangers made me nervous. But I was trying to say yes more often, trying to push myself outside my comfort zone. The party was lovely. Margaret's friends were interesting people. A retired professor, a woman who ran a nonprofit, a couple who traveled extensively, and me, the 71-year-old widow who was still figuring out who she was, but I held my own, contributed to conversations, told a few stories from my own life that made people laugh, and by the end of the evening, I realized I'd enjoyed myself, really enjoyed myself, not just tolerated it, but actually had fun. One of Margaret's friends, a man named Arthur, walked me to my car afterward. He was probably mid-70s, distinguished looking, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. "I enjoyed talking with you tonight," he said. "Margaret's told me about you. Said you've been through a difficult time." "I have, but I'm doing better now." "That's good. If you ever want to grab coffee sometime, I'd enjoy that." As friends, he added quickly, "No pressure." I was surprised, and flattered, and terrified. I hadn't been on any kind of date, even a casual, friendly one, since David died. The thought of it made my heart race, but I heard Dr. Mitchell's voice in my head, about being brave, about trying new things, about staying open to possibility. "I'd like that," I heard myself say. Arthur smiled. "Great. I'll give Margaret my number to pass along to you. And maybe we can meet up next week?" "That sounds nice." Driving home, I felt a mixture of excitement and panic. What was I doing? Was this too soon? Would it feel like betraying David? What if Arthur wanted more than friendship? What if I was completely misreading the situation? But beneath the anxiety, there was something else. Curiosity, hope, the sense that maybe, just maybe, my life could still hold surprises, still hold new connections, still hold possibilities I hadn't considered. I called Linda as soon as I got home, told her what had happened, and she was thrilled. "This is huge. You have to go." "What if it's awkward? What if I don't know what to talk about?" "Then it's awkward. So what? You're allowed to be awkward. You're allowed to be nervous. You're allowed to be human. Just go. See what happens. No expectations. Just coffee with a nice man." She was right. It was just coffee, and I could handle coffee. The following Tuesday, I met Arthur at a small cafe downtown. I was 10 minutes early because I'm always early when I'm nervous. And I sat there, watching the door, my stomach doing flips. He arrived right on time, smiled when he saw me, ordered coffee and a scone. And we talked about everything. About our lives before we lost our spouses. About our children. He had 2 daughters who lived out of state. About our struggles with aging and loneliness and trying to figure out what came next. And it was easy, natural, like talking to an old friend. He didn't try to impress me, didn't pretend to be someone he wasn't, just shared his story and listened to mine with genuine interest. When we parted ways an hour and a half later, he asked if I'd like to do it again, and I said yes without hesitation. Walking to my car, I felt lighter than I had in months, years maybe. This wasn't romance, wasn't love, but it was connection. It was someone seeing me as a person, not just as someone's mother or grandmother. It was proof that I could still meet new people and form new relationships and expand my world. I called Rebecca that evening, told her about the coffee, about Arthur, and she sounded genuinely happy for me. "That's great, Mom. What's he like?" "Nice, easy to talk to, a widower too, so he understands." "Are you going to see him again?" "I think so, just as friends. Nothing serious." "You don't have to qualify it, Mom. You're allowed to have a social life. You're allowed to meet people and enjoy yourself." Her words meant more than she probably realized, because I had been qualifying it. Making sure she knew I wasn't replacing David. Making sure she knew I wasn't getting carried away. But she was right. I was allowed to have a life, to pursue connections, to be happy. August brought more of the same. Coffee with Arthur became a weekly thing. We'd meet on Thursdays, talk for an hour or two, and then go our separate ways. Sometimes Linda would join us, and the 3 of us would talk and laugh and enjoy each other's company. Other times it was just the 2 of us, and both were nice in different ways. I continued my classes and my volunteer work, continued my walks with Linda and my Friday coffees with Margaret. My calendar, which had been so empty in November, was now full. Not overwhelming, but full, with activities and people and things to look forward to. Rebecca invited me over for dinner one evening in late August. Just family, no special occasion. And after we'd eaten and the kids had gone upstairs to do homework, she and I sat on her back porch with glasses of wine. "You seem happy, Mom," she said. "Happier than I've seen you in years." "I am. It's been a journey, but I'm in a better place. I'm glad. And I'm sorry for how I handled things before, for pushing you away instead of being honest about what I needed. We've both made mistakes, but we're figuring it out now. That's what matters. I want you to know that I do love you, even when I'm bad at showing it, even when I need space. I love you." Hearing those words made my throat tight. "I love you too, so much." We sat there in comfortable silence for a while, mother and daughter, imperfect but trying, and that felt like enough. More than enough. September arrived with cooler air and changing leaves, the kind of month that signals transition. Summer ending, fall beginning, everything shifting, and I felt like I was in my own transition, moving from the person I'd been defined entirely by my relationships with others to someone new, someone who existed fully even when alone. I'd been seeing Dr. Mitchell for almost 10 months now, and in our most recent session, she'd asked me something I'd never really considered. "When you think about your life 5 years from now, what do you see?" I'd sat with that question for a long time, trying to imagine, and I realized that for the first time in years, I could actually envision a future that felt good. Not perfect, not without challenges, but good. "I see myself still doing the things I'm doing now," I said. "Art classes, volunteering, time with friends, but maybe expanded. Maybe I'll travel more, take some classes at the community college just for fun. Maybe I'll have even deeper friendships. Maybe Arthur and I will still be meeting for coffee, or maybe that will have evolved into something more. Maybe Rebecca and I will have an even better relationship. Maybe the grandkids will actually want to spend time with me as they get older." "Those all sound like wonderful possibilities," Dr. Mitchell said. "And notice how different that vision is from where you were almost a year ago, when you couldn't see any future at all, when everything felt dark and hopeless." She was right. A year ago, I'd been on my bedroom floor, crying so hard I couldn't breathe, wondering if life was worth living. And now I was making plans, having hopes, seeing possibilities. That was progress. Real, significant progress. "Do you still feel like you need therapy?" Dr. Mitchell asked. "Or are you ready to transition out?" The question caught me off guard. I'd been coming to therapy for so long it felt like part of my routine. But she was right to ask. Was I still here because I needed to be? Or because I was comfortable? "I think I'm ready," I said. "Or at least, ready to try. Maybe we could go to monthly check-ins instead of every few weeks, so I have that safety net if I need it." "That sounds perfect. You've done incredible work, and you should be proud of yourself. You came in broken and lost, and you've rebuilt yourself into someone who knows her worth. That's not easy at any age, but especially not in your 70s. Her words made me emotional, because she was right. I had done the work. I'd shown up week after week, even when it was hard, even when it was painful, even when I wanted to give up. And I'd changed, fundamentally changed. That evening, I celebrated in my own quiet way. I made myself a nice dinner, opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving, sat on my back porch watching the sunset, and I felt grateful, not just for the progress I'd made, but for the journey itself, for everything I'd learned about myself and about life and about what really matters. Arthur and I continued our Thursday coffee dates through September and into October. And one Thursday, he asked if I'd like to go to a concert with him. A local orchestra was performing, and he had an extra ticket because his daughter had been planning to visit but had to cancel. A concert. That was different from coffee. That felt more like an actual date. And I felt that familiar flutter of anxiety, but also excitement. Because why not? Why not go to a concert with a kind man who enjoyed my company? Why not allow myself to experience new things? "I'd love to," I said. The concert was on a Saturday evening in mid-October. I spent way too much time deciding what to wear. Felt like a teenager getting ready for prom. Eventually settled on a simple dress and a nice cardigan. Nothing too fancy, but put together. Arthur picked me up at 6, brought flowers, complimented my dress, and we drove to the concert hall, talking easily like we always did. But there was something different about the evening. Something that felt special. Like this was more than just friends meeting for coffee. The concert was beautiful. Beethoven and Mozart. Music that stirred something deep inside me. And sitting there in the dark theater, surrounded by other people, listening to something beautiful, I felt connected to the world in a way I hadn't felt in years. Connected to humanity, to art, to life itself. Afterward, Arthur drove me home, walked me to my door, and there was a brief, charged moment where I thought he might kiss me. But he didn't, just squeezed my hand and said, "I had a wonderful time tonight." Me too. Can we do this again? Not just coffee, but actual dates. If that's something you'd be interested in? My heart was pounding. This was it. The moment where I had to decide if I was ready for this. If I could let someone else into my life in this way. If I could open myself up to the possibility of connection and all the vulnerability that came with it. Yes, I said. I'd like that. He smiled. And I saw in his eyes the same nervousness I felt. The same hope. The same tentative belief that maybe, despite everything we'd both been through, we could still find happiness. After he left, I sat in my living room for a long time, processing what had just happened. I wasn't in love with Arthur. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I liked him, enjoyed his company, felt comfortable with him. And that was enough for now. More than enough. I called Linda immediately. She answered on the first ring. How was it? Wonderful. And he asked if we could start actually dating. And I said yes. Linda screamed. Actually screamed. I'm so proud of you. This is huge. Is it? It feels huge but also terrifying. Of course it's terrifying. Opening yourself up to someone new is always terrifying. But it's also exciting. And you deserve excitement. You deserve companionship. You deserve someone who treats you well and makes you happy. We talked for another half hour, dissecting every moment of the evening. And by the time we hung up, I felt settled, at peace with my decision. Whatever happened with Arthur, I was glad I'd said yes. Glad I was trying. The following week, Rebecca called. We'd gotten into a rhythm of talking every Sunday afternoon. Just checking in, sharing updates, staying connected without overwhelming each other. How are you, Mom? I'm good. Actually, I have some news. What kind of news? I went on a date. A real date. With Arthur, the man I told you about. There was a pause. Then, that's great. How was it? It was nice. We went to a concert. And afterward, he asked if we could start dating. And I said yes. Mom, I'm so happy for you. You deserve this. You deserve to have someone in your life who makes you happy. Her enthusiasm was genuine. I could hear it in her voice. And it meant everything to have her support. To know that she wanted good things for me. It's not serious, I clarified. We're just seeing where it goes. But it feels good to have someone to do things with. Someone who understands what it's like to lose a spouse and start over. That's exactly what you need. I'm really happy for you, Mom. We talked a bit more about other things. And when we hung up, I felt surrounded by support. By people who cared about me. And that was a gift I didn't take for granted. Halloween came. And for the first time in years, I went to Rebecca's neighborhood to see the kids trick or treating. She'd invited me. And I'd accepted. Jackson was dressed as some character from a video game I didn't recognize. Lily was a witch. They were adorable and excited. And watching them run from house to house with their friends made my heart full. Rebecca and I walked behind them, talking and laughing. And at one point, she looped her arm through mine. I'm glad you're here, she said. Me too. We should have been doing this all along. Including you more. I'm sorry it took me so long to figure that out. We both needed time to figure things out. But we're here now. That's what matters. November arrived, bringing with it the anniversary of that terrible Thanksgiving. A year ago, I'd spent the holiday alone, devastated and broken. But this year was different. This year, I was different. Rebecca invited me for Thanksgiving dinner. No hesitation. No last-minute invitation. She called 3 weeks in advance and made it clear I was wanted. Not just tolerated. We're keeping it small. Just us and Michael's parents. But we really want you there, Mom. It wouldn't be the same without you. I'd love to come. Great. Can you bring your famous apple pie? My famous apple pie. The one I'd been making for decades. The one I'd stopped making last year because no one seemed to care. The one that was, apparently, missed. Of course. In the days leading up to Thanksgiving, I felt a mixture of emotions. Gratitude for how far I'd come. Sadness for how much pain I'd experienced. Hope for what the future might hold. But mostly I just felt peaceful. Content. Like I'd weathered a terrible storm and come out the other side. Battered but intact, Arthur invited me to join him and his daughters for Thanksgiving. They were flying in from out of state, and he wanted me to meet them. It was a big step, meeting his family, but I had to decline. I'd already committed to Rebecca, and I wanted to honor that commitment. Next year, Arthur said, maybe next year we can do something together. Next year. The idea that we'd still be seeing each other a year from now felt both scary and wonderful. But I just smiled and said, maybe. Thanksgiving Day arrived with clear skies and cold air. I made my apple pie that morning, taking my time with the crust, making sure it was perfect. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because I wanted it to be good. Because I took pride in my baking. Because it was something I was good at. I arrived at Rebecca's house at 2 o'clock. Michael's parents were already there. Patricia hugged me warmly. It's so good to see you. Rebecca talks about you all the time. About how well you're doing. Thank you. It's been a good year. A hard year, but a good one. The afternoon was lovely. We sat around the table, all of us, and took turns saying what we were grateful for. When it was my turn, I said, I'm grateful for second chances. For the opportunity to rebuild relationships and rebuild myself. And I'm grateful for all of you for being patient with me while I figured things out. Rebecca's eyes were teary when I finished. And later, when we were cleaning up the kitchen together, she hugged me tight. Thank you for not giving up on us. Mom, thank you for doing the work to get better. Thank you for being willing to try again. For meeting me halfway. I love you. I love you too. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of awkwardness. Still areas where we weren't quite in sync. But it was real. And it was good. And it was enough. December brought the busy holiday season. But this year, I didn't feel overwhelmed by it. I had my own traditions now. My own activities. Coffee with Arthur. Movie nights with Linda and Margaret. My art class holiday party. And yes, time with Rebecca and the grandkids. But it was balanced. None of it felt like too much or not enough. It all felt like pieces of a full, rich life. On Christmas Eve, I hosted a small dinner party at my house. The first time I'd done that in years. I invited Arthur, Linda, Margaret, and a few other friends from my various activities. And my house, which had been so quiet and empty for so long, was filled with laughter and conversation and life. Arthur stayed after everyone else left, helping me clean up. This was wonderful, he said. Thank you for including me. Thank you for coming, for being part of my life. He took my hand. I've been thinking about something, about us. And I want to say it even though it might be too soon. My heart started racing. Okay. I care about you. A lot. More than just as a friend. And I'm not asking for anything serious or permanent. I just want you to know that this, whatever this is between us, it matters to me. You matter to me. I felt tears spring to my eyes. You matter to me too. And I don't know where this is going or what it means. But I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we found each other. He smiled. And then, finally, he kissed me, gently, tentatively, like he was asking permission. And I kissed him back. And it felt right. Not like betraying David, not like replacing him, but like opening myself up to new possibilities. Like choosing to keep living even after loss. Like honoring the life I still had left. Christmas Day, I spent the morning at Rebecca's house. Watched the kids open presents. Had brunch with the family. And then in the afternoon, I went to Arthur's house to meet his daughters. They were lovely, warm and welcoming. And seeing Arthur with them, seeing the kind of father he was, made me appreciate him even more. As the year came to a close, I found myself reflecting on everything that had changed. A year ago, I'd been in the darkest place of my life. Alone, rejected, hopeless. I'd questioned whether life was worth living. Whether I had any value. Whether anyone would care if I just disappeared. But I'd done the work. I'd shown up to therapy week after week. I'd pushed myself to try new things. I'd built friendships. I'd repaired my relationship with my daughter. I'd learned to find joy in small moments. I'd discovered that I was a whole person, worthy of love and respect, independent of my relationships with others, and I'd found something I didn't expect. The possibility of new love. Not the all-consuming love of my youth, but something gentler, steadier, more aware of how precious and fragile life is. On New Year's Eve, Arthur and I went to dinner at a quiet restaurant. Nothing fancy, just good food and good conversation. And at midnight, we toasted to the new year, to possibilities, to second chances, to the unexpected gifts that come after great loss. "What are you hoping for this year?" Arthur asked. I thought about it, really thought about it. More of this, more connection, more joy, more living instead of just existing. And maybe, if we're lucky, a few more years of growing old together. He smiled, raised his glass. "I'll drink to that." And as the new year began, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Excitement, hope, genuine belief that the future could be good, that my best days weren't behind me, that at 72 years old, I could still grow and change and discover new parts of myself. It wasn't the life I'd imagined. It wasn't the retirement I'd planned. But it was mine, fully, authentically mine. And that made all the difference. The new year brought with it a sense of possibility I hadn't felt in decades. Not the optimism of youth, but something more grounded, more realistic. The understanding that life would continue to have challenges and disappointments, but that I was equipped to handle them now, that I'd survived the worst and come out stronger. My relationship with Arthur continued to deepen through January and February. We fell into comfortable routines. Dinner on Tuesdays, coffee on Thursdays, weekend activities when we both felt like it. It wasn't passionate or dramatic. It was steady, reliable, and after years of uncertainty and pain, steady felt like a gift. One evening in mid-February, we were having dinner at his house when he showed me something. A photo album from his marriage. Pictures of him and his late wife, their daughters, family vacations and milestones. "I want you to see this," he said, "to know about her, about that part of my life. Because it's important to me that you understand that loving you doesn't mean I've stopped loving her. It just means I'm capable of loving more than once." I understood exactly what he meant. Because I felt the same way about David. He would always be part of me, always be the love of my youth, the father of my child, the man who shaped so much of who I became. But that didn't mean I couldn't open my heart to someone new. That didn't mean I had to spend the rest of my life alone, clinging to the past. "Thank you for sharing this with me," I said. "And I want you to know the same thing. David will always be important to me, but that doesn't diminish what I feel for you." We spent the evening looking through his photos, and I shared stories about David, about our life together, about the good times and the hard times. And it felt healing, like integrating the past and present, like honoring what was while embracing what is. My relationship with Rebecca continued to improve as well. We'd found a rhythm that worked for both of us. I saw the grandkids regularly but not constantly. She called when she wanted to talk, and I didn't guilt her when she didn't. We'd established boundaries that felt healthy instead of hurtful. In March, Jackson had a school project about family history. He needed to interview older relatives and create a presentation. Rebecca asked if I'd be willing to talk to him, share stories about my childhood and my parents and what life was like when I was young. I said yes immediately. And the afternoon, Jackson came over with his notebook and recorder, asking me questions and listening intently to my answers. Felt like one of the best afternoons I'd had in years. He was genuinely interested, asked thoughtful follow-up questions, wanted to know details. And for those 2 hours, I felt seen by my grandson in a way I'd never felt before. Not just as grandma, but as a person with a whole life and history that mattered. When he left, I called Rebecca. "Thank you for suggesting he talk to me. That meant more than you know. He really enjoyed it. He's been talking non-stop about all the stories you told him, about how different things were when you were growing up. I enjoyed it too. Made me feel like I still have something to offer. Stories, history, perspective. You have a lot to offer." Mom, and I'm sorry it took me so long to really see that. We talked for almost an hour that evening. About everything. About her job and my classes and Arthur and the kids. And it felt easy, natural, like talking to a friend, not just fulfilling a daughterly obligation. April brought warmer weather and a decision I'd been contemplating for weeks. My house felt too big for just me, too full of memories, too much maintenance, and I'd been thinking about downsizing, about finding something smaller, more manageable, more suited to this new chapter of my life. I mentioned it to Dr. Mitchell during one of our monthly check-ins. "How does the idea of moving make you feel?" she asked, scared, but also excited. "This house represents so much of my past. David and I bought it together. We raised Rebecca here. There are memories in every room. Letting go of it feels huge, but I'm not the same person who lived in those memories. I'm someone new, and maybe I need a space that reflects that. Something that's mine, not ours, not from my old life, but from this new one I'm building." That sounds incredibly healthy, like you're choosing to move forward instead of staying stuck. She was right. It was healthy, but it was also terrifying. And I needed time to sit with the decision before I actually did anything about it. I talked to Arthur about it on one of our Tuesday dinners. "What do you think?" I asked. I sat there for a long time after that call, turning it over in my mind, trying to decide if I was being manipulated or if Rebecca genuinely wanted to repair things. Part of me wanted to go to the party, wanted to believe that this was an olive branch, a chance to rebuild. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt too many times, wanted to protect myself, wanted to say no, wanted to prove that I didn't need her as much as she thought I did. But the truth was, I did need her. She was my daughter, my only child, and despite everything, I loved her. I'd always love her. That was the curse and the blessing of being a mother. Your love doesn't stop just because it's not returned the way you need it to be. The days leading up to my therapy appointment were heavy. I went through my routines mechanically. Painting class, library volunteer shift, grocery shopping. But I was barely present. Just a body going through motions while my mind was somewhere else. Somewhere dark and confused and scared. When the day of my appointment finally arrived, I almost didn't go. I sat in my car in the parking lot of Dr. Mitchell's office building for 15 minutes, trying to convince myself to walk inside. It felt like admitting defeat, like announcing to the world that I couldn't handle my own life, that I was weak, broken, failing. But eventually, I went in, because staying broken felt worse than admitting I needed help. Dr. Mitchell was younger than I expected, maybe late 40s. She had kind eyes and a gentle voice and an office that felt warm and safe. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, tissues on every surface, as if she expected people to cry. And I did cry. Almost immediately, she asked me to tell her what brought me in. And I did. I told her everything. About David dying. About Rebecca pulling away. About feeling unwanted and invisible. About the Thanksgiving that didn't include me. About the phone call where my daughter told me I was exhausting. About the loneliness that felt like it was suffocating me. About the thoughts I'd had on my bedroom floor that scared me. And she listened. Really listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't judge. Just let me pour it all out until I had nothing left to say. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That sounds incredibly painful and isolating. And I want you to know that what you're feeling is valid. It makes sense given what you've experienced." Those words, "what you're feeling is valid," made me cry again. Because no one had said that to me. Everyone had told me to give Rebecca space, to not take it personally, to understand that young families need independence. But no one had acknowledged that it hurt. That rejection from your own child, no matter the reason, is one of the deepest wounds a person can experience. Dr. Mitchell asked me questions about my relationship with Rebecca when she was younger, about my expectations for my later years, about how I defined my own worth, about what I wanted my life to look like going forward. I didn't have good answers for most of her questions. I'd spent so much of my life defining myself through my relationships with others, wife, mother, grandmother, that I didn't know who I was outside of those roles. I didn't know what I wanted because I'd never really thought about it. I'd always thought about what my family needed, what would make them happy. But what about me? What made me happy? I didn't know. And that realization was almost as painful as the loneliness. Dr. Mitchell gave me homework. She asked me to start a journal, not about Rebecca or my family, but about me, what I felt, what I wanted, what brought me joy, even in small doses. She said we needed to rebuild my sense of self, that I needed to learn that I was a person worthy of love and respect independent of my role as a mother. It sounded good in theory, but I wasn't sure I believed it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a blank notebook in front of me. Dr. Mitchell's homework. Write about what makes you happy. I stared at the empty page for a long time, tried to think of something, anything, but my mind was blank. What made me happy? Spending time with my grandchildren. But they didn't want to spend time with me. Talking to my daughter, but she found me exhausting. Cooking for my family, but they didn't eat what I made. Everything that had brought me joy was tied to people who didn't want me around anymore. So what was left? What did I have that was mine alone? I thought about the watercolor class. I wasn't good at it, but there was something peaceful about mixing colors, about watching paint spread across paper, about creating something, even if it was messy and imperfect. That was mine. That small thing, that counted, didn't it? I wrote it down. Watercolors make me happy, even though I'm bad at them. I thought about my morning coffee, how I like to sit by the window and watch the birds at the feeder in my backyard, how there was something calming about that quiet ritual. That was mine too. I wrote it down. Morning coffee by the window. Slowly, I started finding small things. Walking in the park near my house. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery downtown. Old movies that reminded me of simpler times. Reading before bed. The way my house looked when afternoon sun came through the curtains. They were small things. Insignificant things. But they were mine. And maybe that was a start. Maybe happiness didn't have to be big and dramatic. Maybe it could be small and quiet. Maybe I could build a life from these tiny moments of peace. The next day, I made a decision about Rebecca's Christmas party. I would go, not because I was desperate for her approval or because I couldn't survive without her, but because I wanted to. Because despite everything, I still wanted a relationship with my daughter. And relationships require effort, require showing up, even when it's hard, even when you're scared of being hurt again. But I would go on my own terms. I would go as someone who was valuable and worthwhile independent of whether she appreciated me or not. I would go because I chose to, not because I needed to. And if it went badly, if I was made to feel unwelcome or exhausting or like a burden, I would leave. I would protect myself. I would choose myself. It was a small shift in thinking, but it felt important. It felt like the beginning of something. Not healing exactly, but maybe the possibility of healing. I called Rebecca the next day, told her I would come to the party. She sounded genuinely happy, relieved even, said she was glad, said we'd have a chance to talk. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a tiny spark of something that might have been hope. The days between that phone call and the party passed in a strange sort of limbo. I was nervous, scared of what might happen, scared of being rejected again, but also determined to show up, to try. To give this one more chance, I went to my watercolor class, painted a winter scene, bare trees against gray sky. It was melancholy but honest. The instructor said it had feeling, that sometimes the sad paintings are the most powerful because they're the most true. I went to the library, shelved books, read to children who listened with wide eyes and open hearts. They didn't care that I was old or sad or lonely. They just cared about the story, about the voices I did. About the pictures on the pages. With them, I was enough. I was wanted, even if just for that hour. I saw Dr. Mitchell again, told her about my decision to go to the party. She asked me what I was hoping for, and I thought about it, really thought about it. I'm hoping for honesty, I said finally. I'm hoping Rebecca and I can have a real conversation, not just surface pleasantries, but real talk about what's wrong and how to fix it. And what if she's not ready for that conversation? Dr. Mitchell asked gently. What if she just wants you there to check a box? To feel like she's done her daughterly duty? Then I'll know, I said. And I can decide what to do with that information. But I need to try. I need to know if there's anything real left between us or if it's all just obligation and guilt, Dr. Mitchell nodded. That's fair. Just remember, you can't control how she shows up. You can only control how you show up. Go with integrity, with honesty, with self-respect, and whatever happens, you'll know you did your best. Those words stayed with me. You can only control how you show up. It was true. I couldn't make Rebecca love me the way I wanted to be loved. Couldn't make her value me or need me or want me around. All I could do was be honest about what I needed, be clear about my boundaries, and then let her decide how she wanted to respond. December 23rd arrived faster than I expected. The day of the party. I spent the morning preparing, not just physically choosing clothes, doing my hair, but emotionally, reminding myself of why I was going, what I hoped for, what I would accept and what I wouldn't. I chose a simple outfit. Nothing too fancy. I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard, but nothing too casual either. I wanted to look put together, dignified, like a woman who valued herself, even if others didn't. I arrived at Rebecca's house at 6:15. Fashionably late. Not so late it was rude, but late enough that other guests would already be there. I didn't want to be the first one. Didn't want that awkward arrival where it's just family trying to figure out what to say to each other. There were cars in the driveway. The house was lit up, warm light spilling from the windows. I could see people moving inside, hear the faint sound of music and laughter, and I sat in my car for a moment, gathering my courage, reminding myself that I was choosing to be here, that I had value, that I deserved respect. I walked to the front door and rang the bell. Michael answered. He smiled, seemed genuinely pleased to see me. "Hey, Mom! Come in. Come in. Let me take your coat." I stepped inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine. Christmas decorations everywhere. A tree in the corner of the living room, covered in lights and ornaments. And people. Maybe 20 people scattered throughout the space. Some I recognized, Michael's parents, a few of Rebecca's friends. Others I didn't know. Rebecca came over immediately. She was wearing a red sweater and looked tired but happy. "Mom, you came!" She hugged me. A real hug, not one of those stiff, obligatory ones. And for a moment, I let myself believe that maybe this would be okay. Maybe we could fix this. "Thanks for inviting me," I said. "Of course. I'm glad you're here. Come on, let me introduce you to some people." She led me around the room, introduced me to friends I hadn't met before, neighbors, Michael's colleagues. Everyone was polite, smiled, said nice things, but I felt out of place, like I was the odd piece that didn't quite fit. The elderly mother at a party for people decades younger than me. I found a corner and settled in with a glass of wine. Watched the party happen around me. Jackson and Lily ran past at one point, barely acknowledging me, too caught up in whatever game they were playing with other kids. Rebecca was busy hosting, making sure everyone had drinks, laughing at someone's joke, looking effortlessly social in a way I'd never managed to be. Michael's mother, Patricia, came over and sat beside me. We'd met several times before but had never really connected. She was one of those women who seemed perpetually cheerful, always smiling, always seeing the bright side. "How are you, dear?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said automatically. She studied me for a moment. "You look sad." Her directness surprised me. I wasn't used to people being that honest. "I suppose I am a bit. The holidays can be hard," she said. "Especially after losing a spouse." "David, wasn't it?" "Yes, it's been 7 years, but sometimes it still feels fresh." She nodded. "I can imagine. I don't know what I'd do if I lost Robert. He's been my partner for 43 years. 43 years. David and I had 42 before cancer took him. All those years of partnership. And then nothing. Just empty space where a person used to be." "Do you have other children?" Patricia asked. "Besides Rebecca?" "No, just her." "That must make it harder. When they grow up and get busy with their own lives." "It does," I admitted. And then, before I could stop myself, I added, "Sometimes I feel like I don't fit anymore. Like there's no space for me in her life." Patricia looked at me with sympathy. "I think a lot of parents feel that way. My 3 kids are all busy with their own families. Sometimes weeks go by without hearing from them. But that's life, isn't it? We raise them to be independent. And then we miss them when they actually are. How do you deal with it? I asked. The loneliness? She smiled. I stay busy. I have my bridge club and my book group and volunteer work. I spend time with Robert. We travel when we can. And I try to remember that my kids' independence is a sign I did my job well. Even when it hurts, it was kind advice. Logical advice. But it didn't make the hurt less real. Rebecca came over then. Mom, can we talk? In private? My heart jumped. This was it. The conversation I'd been hoping for and dreading in equal measure. I followed her upstairs to her bedroom. She closed the door behind us. We stood there, facing each other, and the air felt heavy with everything unsaid. I want to apologize, Rebecca said, for Thanksgiving, for the things I said, for making you feel unwanted. Okay, I said carefully. I was stressed and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair. Was it true though? Do you find me exhausting? She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. Sometimes, she admitted, but that's on me, not you. I think I've been struggling with having you around because it reminds me that I'm not doing it perfectly. Being a mother, running a household, managing everything. And when you're here, I feel judged, even when you're not actually judging me. I'm not trying to judge you, Rebecca. I'm trying to help. I know. But your help feels like criticism sometimes, like I'm not measuring up to the mother you were. Her words hit me hard, because I had compared. Maybe not out loud, but in my head. I'd looked at how she parented and thought about how I would have done it differently. How I did do it differently. And maybe she'd sensed that. Maybe I hadn't been as subtle as I thought. I'm sorry, I said. I never meant to make you feel that way. I know you didn't, but Mom, you have to understand. I need to figure out how to be a mother in my own way. Not your way, my way. And I can't do that with you always there. Always offering suggestions. Always doing things before I can do them myself. So what are you saying? That you don't want me around at all? No, I'm saying I need boundaries. I need you to let me ask for help instead of always offering it. I need you to respect that Michael and I are doing things our own way, even if it's not how you would do it. I need you to have your own life so you're not so focused on mine. It was harsh, but it was honest. And I'd ask for honesty. I'm trying to build my own life, I said quietly. It's just hard when you're 71 and alone and the people you love most don't seem to need you anymore. Rebecca's expression softened. I do need you, Mom, just differently than you need me. And I think that's where the tension is. You need me more than I need you. And that's not your fault. But it's also not something I can fix. And there it was. The truth I'd been avoiding. I needed her more than she needed me. And that imbalance was killing our relationship. Because need breeds resentment. And resentment breeds distance. And distance breeds loneliness. So what do we do? I asked. I think we need to reset. Start fresh. With clear expectations. I'll invite you to things. But you have to wait for invitations instead of assuming you're included. And when you're here, you have to let me be the parent. Let me make mistakes. Let me figure things out without jumping in to fix everything. And in return, I'll try to include you more. Try to make sure you don't feel forgotten. Try to call more often, even if just to chat. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was something. It was more honest than we'd been in years. And honesty, even painful honesty, was better than the silent resentment that had been growing between us. Okay, I said. I'll try. That's all I'm asking. We hugged. And this time it felt different. Not perfect. Not healed. But real. Like we were actually trying instead of just going through motions. When we went back downstairs, the party was still going. But something had shifted in me. I didn't feel quite as out of place. Didn't feel quite as unwanted. I had clarity now. I knew where I stood. And while it wasn't ideal, it was honest. And I could work with honest, and this is where my story ends tonight. Life doesn't always give us answers right away. Sometimes, God asks us to stay patient, stay kind, and stay silent not because we are weak, but because He sees what others do not. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect. Maybe someone needed this reminder today. Thank you for listening with an open heart. May God see every silent struggle and replace pain with peace. Until next time. This was voice of Auntie Universe.